and just believing that they were immortal. Until one day, once you believe it, one of them died. And they sat around the corpse of their fellow cult member, coming up with all the possible reasons that this person could have died. Just trying to wrap their head around it, coming up with all these absurd, loopholes in their logic to make sense of it. And even my friend did that, even though he could tell deep down something was obviously wrong. But he was so deep into the cult and its lore, he would have done anything at the time to make sense of the death. And at some point in their travels across the country, they were at I think a gas station, and there were some books, maybe it was a library actually, and there were some books by the bathroom where he was waiting in line. And he picked up one book, so he says, and opened it up, and it talked about the idea of the invisible mountain. And the idea basically is kind of how you determine if you are mad in terms of insanity. He opened it up and it said, say you have a map and it's trying to get you to this mountain. And when you get to where when you get to the place where the map says there's supposed to be a mountain, there's no mountain. What do you do? Do you believe in the mountain so much that you draw a mountain on the map even though there's no mountain in reality? Or do you come to terms with reality? And when he read that, he was like, that's exactly what I'm doing with the corpse of my fellow cult member. So he left, his family left, and that is a constant reminder to me about being aware of your surroundings and the people you're with, and how you've been brainwashed by the society that you keep closest to yourself. This is Inverted World Live. What is up? It's good to see everybody. I'm your host, Shane Cashman. Welcome back to Inverted World Live. I'm joined by Alex. Alex is back. What is up?
Hey, Shane. Hi, everybody. It's good to be back.
It's great to see you.
Good to see you.
We have a really interesting, wild episode lined up. I'm really excited for it. I'm fascinated by religious sects and cults, and what brings people to them and how people leave them. Two of my favorite shows of all time are The Leftovers and True Detective. And I feel like a lot of what we're going to talk about today is kind of a blend of both, because there's some very unfortunate sexual misconduct, some really big depravity that seems to have taken place in this cult. But also in a larger scale, that's in relation to True Detective season 1 in particular. And then in terms of The Leftovers, for those who don't know, it's basically about a world that experienced a rapture type event. And in the aftermath of that rapture type event, all these people disappear, no one knows why. All these cults emerge. And after or during lockdowns for COVID, it seemed to me like we were living inside The Leftovers, because there's this massive event that took place that no one could really explain. I mean, some of us could. We knew what was going on. But a lot of people didn't know what was going on. And you saw various cults emerge, whether it was political or legit cults, as we think of them. Something super bizarre was happening. And the idea of the cult and joining one had been accelerating through that time.
And here we are wearing our white.
Yeah, nice. Shout out to The Leftovers. What was the name of that cult? Do you remember? Oh, they had a great name.
I don't remember the name, but we need our cigarettes and just be silent for the rest of the episode.
Oh my goodness. Great show, guys. I love that show. So, well, let's get into it.
Yeah.
Let's bring in Tami Pacheco. I'm very excited to have you with us. Tami, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
So I titled this today, Escaping the Cult with No Name. When you're in this cult with no name, also known by the 2x2s, also known as the Truth, is that something when you're in the cult you're thinking of? Like, are they thinking like, hey, we're the church with no name? Or are you literally not labeling it?
It literally, to my perception growing up, was called the Truth. That's what, and I was asked about that a lot, because like in school, I couldn't square dance. Like I would get a note excusing me from anything to do that they deemed weird or, worldly. And so I was constantly asked about that, but we were known as the truth.
Can you describe what they mean by worldly?
So the way the truth is they follow the New Testament, and it seems to me that they follow it when it applies to whatever it is they're trying to make you do.
Right.
So worldly is anybody that's not in the truth. So we weren't allowed to play sports. Like I had a full ride scholarship to play field hockey, and the coach called and begged my parents to let me go to college. And that was, especially as a female, females don't have good roles. Mm-hmm. We either marry and have kids and propagate the masses, mm-hmm. Or we become female preachers. Right. We don't go to school. We weren't, that's changed a lot as the times have changed. Some of the stuff the kids do today would never have happened in my time. We wore dresses every day. We wore our hair in a bun. Very similar to the FLDS or Amish looking. Yeah. My mom made our clothes, made our dresses, and we just didn't associate with anybody outside the truth. And let me tell you, they're in every country, every city. Strangely enough, the closest thing I've ever found in structure is AA. Really? AA they don't own property, they don't own buildings, and they did AA based theirs solely on making sure the egos weren't attached, that they didn't divert from getting people sober by fighting over property and money. Mm-hmm. But these guys got a whole nother thing. So yeah, we grew up not having very little contact with the outside world, just the people within our, city or whatever.
Were you as a child afraid of the outside world? Did they make it seem like it was a scary thing that would take you away from the truth?
They did try to. I was not. I was. My mom and my dad was 17 years older than my mom, and he was a preacher in the truth for some time. We know zero about how they met, what their history is. Wow. He was 17 years older than my mom, and my dad was a character. I loved my dad. I believe my dad, to some degree, was greatly conflicted about being in the truth. He was an Italian. He was like the Italian stallion. He was I very much have his personality. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he agreed, but I also, like his brothers, some of them were very high up in the hierarchy of preachers. Right. And mom and dad had several miscarriages, I think 5. Mm. And one of my uncles, my dad's brother, Sproley, was a missionary in Korea during the war. And he told them to adopt. So they adopted I have a Korean brother and sister. And then, of course, like minutes after getting them home from Korea, they promptly got pregnant, as it always happens. And they ended up having 3 kids.
Of course.
So my mother had 5 babies, like she had no babies, and then suddenly had just a house full. And wow. I think actually in a lot of ways, my mom was really strong. And I believe 100%, and I'll say this over and over, I think my parents were really good people. Mm-hmm. That just got caught in a thing.
So I want to get to that, but we should go back for everyone who doesn't have any context to this cult. Can you bring us back to how this whole thing started? Because I believe it's 100 years old, right?
It's really old, and Tate knows more about it than me. I have learned more in the last year and a half. I know that they're in Australia. I believe they've already had a 60 Minutes episode in Australia on them. So to my knowledge, this guy, William Irvine, something of that sort. Their names, when I go back and read the stuff that's online, it kind of freaks me out a little because they're names from my childhood. And these people wielded a lot of power. Right. And so they meet, their premise is that they go 2 by 2. The preachers go out 2 by 2, and they have no belongings. So they don't own anything. And when you're a kid growing up, you don't really think about that. It's just like they come. So we had in each city, there'll be depending on the size of your city, maybe 10 elders. And each elder will have families in their neighborhood come to their house for meeting. So my dad was an elder, and I think we had 6 or 7 families that came to our house every Sunday morning for meeting, which consisted of reading the Bible, singing hymns, praying, etc. And then on Wednesday nights, they had a Bible study, and that would be at one of the members' houses, and it would rotate out. And it's very organized. It's really interesting for a church with no name, no paper trail, no nothing. Trust me, they are organized. And I look back, you know, my family will never forgive me for speaking out. And I grappled with that for the last year. But my mom and dad are gone, and I have a lot of satisfaction now because I believe that where mom and dad are now, they see the whole picture. Yeah. And I believe that you look down and go, "Oh, Tami, we're so sorry. Right. You know, we're sorry about the nonsense." But the way they structure it, like my mom, for instance, was in charge of one female worker and preacher. They call them workers, right. Workers, preachers, and she would get all that preacher's mail. Well, as a kid growing up, I would see my mom opening envelopes, counting money. And so it didn't occur to me until this last year. I'm like, they were laundering money.
Oh, yeah.
Classic cult, classic cult material.
Yeah.
So like, I want to put that on a shelf real quick because I want to come back to that. Yeah. But as I want to get more into like who these people are, they're not only a cult with no name, but like you're saying, they're a religion with no church, right? So the houses become their places of worship, and they travel to these places, like you're saying. And then going back even further to its inception, you're saying William Irvine, I think it, and then there was a like a schism within it, from what I've read, Cooney, right? I forget his first name. So right, and yeah, it's huge in Australia. I think Irvine was from Ireland, and it's expanded worldwide. Who knows if this is true, you know, because it's like believing in polls, but they say that it used to be a much larger cult. Maybe up to 200,000 people at some point. And then actually during lockdowns, kind of the reverse of what I was saying in the beginning, it started to die, from what I'm reading, you know, but like, I think it's really hard to tell because again, like you're saying, there's no digital footprint unless from someone such as yourself, right? Someone who's left.
Yeah. So they're really sneaky about that though, because this is what I think, it became harder to manage. So they have, like, each state will have, when we start talking, not to segue back into the money, but these are just things along the way. We had a state convention out at Edgewood, which is like 30 miles from Albuquerque. So growing up, my perception was that the people that owned that property were just really rich. Right. And so it was really nice of them to let us all once a year. That was where New Mexico's convention would be. And everybody would come from the neighboring states. So there might be like 2,000 people. And that was your place as a young person to go meet other young people and hopefully, you know, hook up or find them. When I say hook up, I don't mean hook up, but like if you started dating someone, the way you expressed that was you walked down to the corner store with them. And that pairing up of the walk,
2 by 2,
told everybody they were, you were together, you know, just all this like stuff. So a lot of it, like I didn't really ask about, but every state has a convention somewhere. And what I've learned, like the one out here in Texas, we're talking big bucks. Wow. You know, and I don't care, honest to God. Like if you want to have a religion and make a bunch of money, I don't care. You know, if you're spreading the word of God and being good, who am I to judge? You know, certainly I'm a big sinner, but it's just interesting because the perception that I had growing up is so different from what has actually happened. So, and that's my issue with them all is like, be real. Yeah. Be who you are.
Yeah. I have a question. Now that you're out, though, do you feel like you're finding more about it than you did when you were in it?
100%. Listen, I was telling Tate, the day the murder happened, Tate accepted Christ. And he became, because we saw a demon that day. I mean, I can't even, we'll get to that story. But there's things that I've seen my entire life. Like I tried to tell my family that I felt like something was up with my brother. And my brother was like the golden child. And I loved my brother. I was really, really close with him. And so what happened that day in that house profoundly changed Tate and I completely in the trajectory of our life. And Tate, so all these weird things were happening. We start off on our journey. I went back out to Malibu because I was going to get help for PTSD, and like, just you name it. Like we got out there, our car was stolen, our SUV was stolen with all of our equipment, all my laptops, all his musical. I mean, it's just like one shit show after another, pardon my French. And it started me on this journey about what does my life mean, and what is the truth? How does this play a part in how screwed up everything became? And so things would happen like with Tate. He wanted a Bible. And when you're struggling to keep your bills paid, to keep a roof over your head and food, you can't go spend $10, $15 on a Bible. And so a Bible would just appear. Like the most random things would happen. And I started seeing God everywhere. Yeah. And I watched my son. We had to stay in our van. We literally were stranded on the side of PCH in Malibu. And we were in an okay place because there was a couple of surf camps that the guys all parked there and camped out. But the truth of the matter is, Tate and I were in a van for probably 6 months waiting for the guy to fix our van. There's only like one or two guys in Malibu that don't cost, $10,000 to do a radiator. And so I was at this dude's mercy, and we would walk into work every day. And I watched my son stand on the side of the road and pray every morning. He didn't give a shit who was driving by. And I watched his conviction, and I watched him determined to have a relationship with Christ. And I thought, what do I know? What was I taught?
Right.
And I wouldn't tell you. And I started looking at the whole process of the truth and all the brainwashing. Most of the brainwashing was more of God's going to get you. You're going to hell. If you don't do this, this, and that. And I was always I asked questions. Curious George, they used to call me. Why do I have to wear a dress every day? They're beating me up. They're bullying me. I was 6 feet tall in 7th grade. I'm wearing an Amish dress. I'm a moving target, And, I was a little spunky, a little sassy, and I had an attitude. Like they used to go, hey, stretch, how's the weather? And I'd spit on them and go training. I mean, that was me, right?
In your cult outfit?
I know.
That's a great scene.
I was just not most everybody. The way they structure it makes you so reluctant to have friends outside,
right? Because
I wasn't afraid. I just felt like an odd duck. I didn't fit in.
I want to.
Other people were afraid.
I want to first of all shout out to your son Tate, who helped facilitate this. He's awesome. And I want to build up to this murder that you've talked about briefly. That was like the email that Tami sent me. I think the subject was cult murder demons. And I'm like, this sounds like a wild story. But I want to get just a little more understanding on what, like, I know you're saying you have like a real basis for what you were even taught in the cult, but and you said it was a New Testament based religion, so kind of like Christian, but did you consider yourselves Christian in there? Did you what were certain things you were believing? Okay.
Non-denominational, and this is what we parroted out our whole lives. How come you can't go to the movies? It's against my religion. What religion are you? Non-denominational. We're called the truth.
Right.
So we have functionary answers.
Right.
But I guess because the religion that they knew didn't strike my heart in the way it struck theirs.
Right.
I think in hindsight, looking back, it was all surface. So you marry within the truth. Mm-hmm. You're not allowed to divorce. Mm. If you get divorced, you can never remarry. Unless you leave the truth and come back. I always love that caveat. So I can just go out and sin a little and then circumvent the rules and come back and reprofess. They call it professing. When you stand up in a gospel meeting and accept Christ, you have professed that Christ is your Lord and Savior. I've been baptized in the church. I was baptized at Edgewood Convention. And when I look back on what the truth is, part of me wants to protect the loving people that I knew, my mom, my aunts, my uncles. But the truth of the matter is all of them, especially the women, it's so shame-based. They made you ashamed about your body. Masturbation was like, holy snoggers. And you know what, like I was a kid. I remember being like just a kid and you know, this is probably a little graphic for people, but you know, I was just a little kid and I was getting ready to take my bath and I was standing there with a teddy bear. And I remember like I rubbed myself with it. I had guileless. I had no idea what you know what I mean? At that age, you're just a kid.
Just like innocent curiosity.
My mom saw me do that and like her face went white. And she said, if you ever do that again, I'm going to tell Gilbert. Gilbert was the head preacher and the dude was like about 6'4" in real life. So as a toddler, like all I knew in that moment, I had no idea what I had done.
Right.
She didn't explain it. I just knew that whatever that was, it was really bad. And if I ever did it again, he was going to get me.
I wonder if her fear has anything to do with the FBI investigation that's going on now.
Probably. And there was a lot of secrets, you know, like I used to tell people, like I grew up in a 2-story house. There's the story the outside world saw and then the actual story. And like my family was amazing at keeping secrets. My dad struggled with alcohol and my brother's in AA. He's got 30 some odd years, really proud of him for that. And then I struggled with alcohol and drugs in my 30s. And again, I dipped off about 40. And I think that the whole the shame, like if everything in your life is based on shame and my body's bad and I'm bad and my thoughts are bad and God is going to get me. I used to tell people like I've been listening a lot to Laura Sanger and understand how she does like spiritual mapping of land.
Okay.
And I've said for years that I felt like New Mexico has a lot of evil in there because the Spaniards and the natives did atrocities to each other. And so New Mexico, like what's his name, has a ranch out there, you know, Ghislaine, what's his name,
Epstein.
you know, Epstein's
That's
got
right.
a big ranch out there.
Yeah.
There's so Bill Richardson, our governor, was always, I mean, he was on Epstein. So I think that New Mexico, for some reason, is some sort of home base, maybe for evil.
Yeah.
Because I have a lot of evil that has, and for some reason, it always crossed my path in a really strange kind of way. Here's a story for you. So we had Sunday morning meeting at our house, and we had a big bay window. And I sat we would sit in a circle like an AA meeting. And so I'm bored. I must have been about maybe 10 or 11. And I'm just sitting there looking out the window and I see a car pull up and it's like right out in my front yard. And then I see a cop car behind him and I see the cop get out and I see one guy get out and take off running. And then the other guy stops for a minute. And all of a sudden I realize the cop has a gun on him. Well, I've never been around guns. So I'm like, and I don't have a TV. So I'm like, ooh, this is entertaining. And the guy stops and runs through our yard. We had like an L-shaped yard. And he went through our gravel around the back and then came back out. And he stopped right where he had started. And he put his hand at his pocket. And the cop shot him and killed him.
Wow.
Just, and I'm like, oh.
Wow.
You know, and the cop thought he was going for a gun. So I'm like 10 or 11.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. So I became a material witness at 10 or 11 because I saw it became like a thing. Was he reaching for a gun or was he not? Because the family then sued the cop. The cop later committed suicide.
Wow.
And it was this tale of just chaos. And they kept coming back and interviewing me. And so, like, one of the cops was super nice. He knew I was afraid because one of the guys had escaped. And, excuse me, when he would get on shift every night, he would come through and shine his spotlight in my window just to let me know he was on duty.
Wow.
And, like, I know, like, little things like that. Like, and then you fast forward 25 years and I marry a cop. It takes a psychologist too much to figure that out.
Do you think the the cops back then had any idea that your family was in the 2x2s? Like, did they know? Was this a public thing?
I don't think so. I don't think they had any idea. I know when they showed up, because it was a crime scene for days. I know that they thought we were weird, and I know
You're
that
dressed
they
the way you are. You're in an Amish-looking dress. Your hair's in a bun.
Yeah, and they don't know what the truth. My role in the family from once I left home and got out on my own and established myself, like they don't deal that much with the outside world. So like if they needed somebody to talk to an attorney, and I'm talking about my family specifically, like if mom needed a consult or whatever, she would have me go with her, and I would, not interpret, but make sure that she understood, her and dad understood everything. And my dad was savvy. My dad, I'm telling you, I don't know why he was in the cult. I honestly don't. My dad was probably one of the coolest dudes I ever knew.
When did he join? Do you know?
He was a kid. So his family went out to California. And this is my thought in looking back on some of the history. And then I've talked to some people in researching the last year. When they moved to Bakersfield, California, they didn't know anyone. And I think a lot of times in those early years, people like my parents and their parents, my grandparents, who I never knew, were seeking community. And they were seeking a place where they could, so you move with your family to a strange state and you don't know anyone and you believe in God, but you're not Catholic and you're not any of that. And they would hold gospel meetings, and back then, I don't know if they do that anymore, but back then they used to go around and, try to talk to people, sort of like the Mormons, and get people to come to gospel meeting. And so that was their that was how they racked up numbers, that and having children. So, the more kids you...
Correct me if I'm wrong. I guess the point at which this really becomes a cult, because a lot of this is definitely strange, but I think where they crossed the line, even putting all the depraved stuff we'll get into later to the side, is that I think they kind of downplay the role of Christ to some degree, like the love of God seems more conditional in the cult. So you don't know if you're being saved until the point of death.
Correct. Well, yes. So like for me, I had to profess as I came up through the ranks and I got to a certain age, I had to stand up in a gospel meeting and admit that I, accepted Christ, and that made me officially in. But then you're not officially in until you're baptized. Once you're baptized, if you live your life correctly, you get to go to heaven. You're the chosen. Like the only people going to heaven are people in the truth.
That's it.
I don't care what religion you are, you're not going. And that just never made sense to me. So everybody else is wrong.
That's why it seems like it's a hard thing to escape, because if you're born into this and you're told this is the only salvation you have, and from what I'm hearing from various people who've left, is that, it's hard to leave because we've been told our whole lives this is the only way to heaven.
Which is very curious, Kat, which actually brings me to, how old were you? Did you say how old you were when you left? Like, how was it more recent or?
17.
How old?
When I was
17.
When I was 13, 27-year-old in our meeting took a shine to me. 27. And I can tell you today, if a 27-year-old sniffed around my 13-year-old daughter, he might get a bullet. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But that was this whole, Tammy's got a wild streak because she asks too many questions. Tammy's rebellious. And this is the way it was presented to me was, my dad disagreed. My mom, in that instance, overrode him because maybe that'll keep her in the truth, because we don't want her to leave. So, if we let this relationship happen, and I look back on that and I think I was 13 years old. That man knows what he did. My family knows what he did, and never stuck up for me, not once. And then after, I think I was 16, so it went on for a while. The convention was coming up, and that was going to be our first walk together where the world knew. And he had gone to Scottsdale, Arizona convention the week before. And he came, convention starts on Wednesday night and runs through Sunday. He called and said he needed to see me, and he came to our house and dumped me. And he had met a tall blonde named Tami in Scottsdale.
What?
That had money.
Odd
Yeah.
connection.
Whoa.
So
Weird.
then, fast forward like 30 years, and I've been like I can't get enough degrees. I can't prove myself enough. I mean, it had such a lasting impact on me.
Right.
If I get another degree, if I just make more money, they'll love me.
Right. Maybe you were saved from
When
not
you
being
left,
able-
though, did you have a relationship with your parents?
Not for a while. Not for a while. I was cut off. And my relationship with my siblings today is very much the same way. And not just my siblings, my cousins. You know what my big sin is with them right now? Like they don't even talk to me. Is that I asked them for help when we went homeless. That's my big sin. Like, what? It's insanity to me. Like, isn't that what family is for?
Right.
And believe me, I helped every single family member. So there's these weird things because I stepped outside what I'm supposed to, and I said things I wasn't supposed to about the church. So you're like, and it's interesting because I've talked to quite a few of the girls I know from Albuquerque when this story hit and the FBI started calling. My thing was like, okay, are you guys ready to like say something now? Are you ready to step up? This is legit. This is real. This isn't just us complaining that we were sexually abused and treated, I mean, we were mentally abused. I wouldn't say physically because, we didn't get hit or beat or anything like that. But if every day it's never good enough, it's always your fault. I can't even explain how hard on the girls the mothers are. They're so cold. And if a man leaves you, you did something wrong. It's you, you need to change. And that has such a lasting impact. And the sad thing is some of the girls that I grew up with, we've talked since throughout the years. And we all said if we had known that each other was feeling the same way, we could have banded together and helped each other. But we were so isolated amongst our own family and you just didn't talk. We didn't go to counseling. When Chuck dumped me, by the way, that was the first time I saw something with my brother that was cruel. So my brother and I were like 10 months apart, and we looked like twins, and he was my best friend. I cannot explain to you how much I loved him and what a deep, the bond was so bad and so thick that this is like my mother when she thought I was, heading off to bed. She would use my brother to guilt trip me. Right. She would say to me, like, if you don't straighten up, I'm afraid something's going to happen to your brother because, sometimes God takes away the thing you love the most. So I lived in fear that something was going to happen to my brother.
Right.
And then I would see my brother do all this shady stuff. Like I would say to all the men everybody who's watching us and talking about us, oh, they're crazy, they're on drugs, they're this, they're that. When's the last time they looked at porn?
Yep.
So much hypocrisy.
Yep. That's what it seems. Right. That's what it seems a lot. And it's not just unique to the 2x2s. This hypocrisy exists in any organization, especially in the ones that seem to profess being so pure and the one true way. There's look at politics, it's literally everywhere. So your brother is 10 months older than you. And I think you were telling me, or is it 10 months older or?
Yeah. He's about 10 months older than me. His name was Carlin. And so he was very shy. He got my mother's personality. And it always was a rub for him. Like we used to joke about it growing up because he wanted to be like my dad. And I was the carbon copy, spitting image. I didn't take guff off of anybody. And Carlin was just painfully shy. So he was kind of my mom's, I don't want to say pet because I was very loved by my parents. They just clearly, Carlin was the one who, in their eyes, did everything right. But behind the scenes, not so much. Right. Like, I knew where he drank. I knew what women he liked. And none of that did I care about except when you're coming for me. And I would never rat him out, ever in a million years. Here's a like funny example. Like, my mom and dad were out of town and we went to the baseball game. I think it was a Lobo game or football game, big thing in Albuquerque, Lobos, or the hobos, as I like to say. And we get back and mom and dad, my mom was a little detective and she was always trying to bust me and she couldn't break me. And so they call Carlin in and they're like, we talked to your sister and we know everything. You want to tell us what you did this weekend? And he sings like a canary, right? So now they have the deets and then they call the Tampster in. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't go to the game. And like, they couldn't break me. And my dad would get so mad. He's like, Carlin said. And I'm like, he might have gone with somebody, but it wasn't me. That was the like stark difference between us. Like Carlin was easily broken. Mom saw it as easily sweet and very, very much a child of God. Right. Whereas I had a rebellious heart and Carlin was soft and wanted to please God. And I was always questioning. And I was like, I don't think he wants me to get beat up every day.
Right. When you snuck out, were you changing out of that attire you were supposed to be in, or are you still going out?
Oh, let me tell you what sister used to do. Not with my brother, but I used to go out. And this is what happens when you have like this kind of iron will on you all the time. So in my room, I had a window, and this was when I was older. This is when I was in my teens. I would wait for my mom and dad to go to bed, and then I would get up and I would leave my door open about yay big, and I would put a lump in my bed, and I would take a light colored sleeve and put it up there, and then something light on the pillow that looked like blonde hair. So that if dad cruised down the hallway and looked in, it would look like I was in there. And then I would slip out my window. And we never did anything. We were just dumb kids. Mm-hmm. My friend would pick me up around the corner and we would go to Eastdale and go cruising.
Right.
And, that was in one day, we took off and it didn't feel right. That was actually, that night was the first time I felt the feeling that I learned to acknowledge. I today kind of am honing it in to be the gift of discernment. Mm-hmm. I knew immediately that night something was off. I could feel it. Right. And I told my friend, you need to take me home. And so she dropped me off and I walked up and like the lights are all out. And I'm like, well, they can't know because, the fucking lights would be on and it'd be like the preachers would be waiting on the front porch for me. And so I stealthy go up and I open my window and I look, my lump is there. And I'm like, silent as a mouse, up over into the room, and my mother sits up in the bed. Oh. But that's like even my mom. It was like always, there was always, and so I would hide clothes and I would squirrel away money and try to get like a pantsuit, as we called them back then, anything that wasn't the Amish dress.
Right.
And absolutely, I did not want to look like I looked. Right. I didn't want to be. In that, yeah.
So you going back to when you said Chuck broke up with you, that was the first time you saw something bad in your brother. What was that?
So Carlin and I went to the same high school, and I would later categorize him as weak. I saw him lacking courage. So I got bullied and picked on, and that was, I graduated in 78. So in a couple of years prior to that, they decided that they wanted to bus us down to a different district. So there was more white kids in this district. Mm-hmm. And so they took us out of the district that we were in and shipped us down to Highland High School, which was predominantly Hispanic. And, the bullying really ramped up then. Like the Hispanic girls said that they were going to get the hueras and shave their heads. And they put a couple of them in the hospital with razor cuts and stuff. And it was a rough school. It was not a fun time. And they kind of left me alone because they decided I was loco, because I was just at that point really angry. And I was like, bring it. It was the only defense I had. I just, it was like, it's going to hurt anyway. Like I used to walk through the jocks every morning to get to my first period class, and they would shove me and grab my boobs and say, oh, here comes the fucking girl, and she's your girlfriend. Like one time I fell down and my dress was up over my head. I was humiliated on a daily basis. So to know me was to get bullied. So the first day of high school, I remember seeing my brother in the hallway and thinking, oh, thank God, a familiar face. And then he just made eye contact and walked right by me. And like I knew immediately, I understood, like he can't handle it.
Right.
And so I didn't even, like, I wasn't even mad. Mm-hmm. It was just like, okay, I understand. So it was little things like that where I saw him in some ways lacking courage. And I didn't identify it then. So Chuck dumps me. This is my brother and I would get out of school and get in his four-wheel drive and head to the hills, and we would four-wheel drive for hours and talk about everything. And we did this every day. We were thick as thieves. He was my best friend. And when Chuck dumped me, I was crushed. Mm-hmm. I was humiliated and I was crushed and probably clinically depressed.
Right.
And I would go to school every day in my stupid dress. And the entire congregation, the guy dumped me. And for a solid year until he married the other girl, because they were engaged a year until she was old enough. So, yeah, right. Got to wait for those deeds. He came to our meeting, still in front of my family, the workers, everybody still played footsies with me, still played grab ass. And my stupid little time thought, oh, it's going to be okay. He's going to come back,
Right.
And nobody said a word. Everybody's just watching this whole thing and clucking away, right?
Yep.
So I remember Carlin, I was listening to Waylon Jennings and crying. And he came in my room and he goes, I'm really sick of you crying. And I just looked at him and I'm like, what do you want me to do? And he goes, just stop. Mm-hmm. And he didn't speak to me again. And it hurt my heart so bad. And like, he was my one person. He was my guy. He was the one person that knew me, that understood my hurt. You're so dramatic at that age anyway, but then you couple all this weird crap and you really are out there. And that was the first time I did a mantra where there was a song on the radio at the time that said, big girls don't cry, big girls don't cry. And I would just say that over and over and over. And I literally shut down my ability to cry. And I don't think I cried for 10 years. And I never spoke to him again. And we never spoke again for many, many years. And I saw that. It was cruel. Another thing that happened one time, and I'm not saying that he did this with this outcome in mind. I'm just saying it wasn't a very nice thing to do. And I saw glimpses of that throughout our years. I used to rescue dogs. Well, we didn't call it rescue back then, but if there was a stray dog in the neighborhood, I would find it and in my mind, tame it. They were like the only friends I had. Mm-hmm. And I would keep them in the back of the neighbor. The neighbor had old people. They had a backyard. They never went in. And I don't know why, but my brother didn't like that. And I had found this one dog. He was like a husky mix. And, I fancied myself like Jack in Call of the Wild. And that was Buck, my wolf dog.
Right,
and going out there and sneaking him food and stuff. And Carlin ran him off. And they threw rocks at him to get him to go. I'll never forget. I didn't rescue another dog for probably 30 years. That dog turned around looking at me like his eyes were imploring me, and I was just going, don't throw rocks at him. And he got hit by a car and killed.
Sheesh. Do you think your brother was doing this because he wanted to secure a position as an elder in the cult?
Not at that point. He was just a soldier.
Right.
What I learned later. So, I went on to work in the field of mental illness. Right. And I've had a lot of experiences with, at the time, I wouldn't say demons. I just saw people change, and it didn't really, it was pretty. I've seen a lot, and one of the cases that I had picked up. If you ever decide you need to take sleep aids, don't take Ambien.
Oh yeah, heard about that.
It's like the devil's drug. We call it Ambien.
Yeah, it's like a portal.
Dude, so I picked this girl up. I do an intervention, alcoholic, young female. And, when somebody's on their way to treatment, you let them drink. You let them do whatever. Right. And because you don't want them detoxing and going into.
You got to get them there. Yeah.
And so whatever it takes, And so she said she needed to go change her clothes, and her parents were like, should we go in there? And I'm like, nah, she's going to go in there and drink. Let her go drink whatever she's got left, and then she'll be more agreeable. We'll go.
Right.
So she did. She came out and she was in a little sundress. She changed her dress and she smelled like vodka. And I was like, well done, let's go. And we get in the front of the car, and I had an Audi, and she's the one that taught me to put them in the back and hit the locks. So she's sitting in the car, and I'm chatting away with her, and making small talk. And after a while, she gets quiet, and I'm thinking, right on, she passed out. And I kind of look over at her, and she's like, first of all, it's the hands. She's got her hands like real sexual, and she's kind of doing something with her seatbelt strap. And I'm driving, right? And I'm like, oh God, not one of these, right? And then she starts lifting her skirt up, and she doesn't have any underwear on. And I'm like, oh dear God, like this is just unacceptable. And I am not kidding you. I'm right here in the on the left, so I'm her. And all of a sudden, her head just goes, "Mom," and she looks right at me. And every year, her eyes were as black as could be. It was like a demon.
Wow.
I called my nurse and said, abort, meet me at the hospital. I got an Ambien OD.
Wow.
It was like her eyes were black, and the way she locked in on me, it was like she just almost transformed and freaked me out.
Yeah.
Like I had to go sage cleansing because I was like, I can't have that energy in my car. And, when she was detoxed, she was fine. But that was when I started saying, I wonder if mental illness addiction is the key for the devil.
Yeah.
And that it can't begin this like really a questioning for me that I didn't speak out loud.
Right.
It was just something that I saw so much evil, and I wondered like why are people evil? So with my brother and my relationship with him, I was in a real good place with my parents, and my mom died about 10 years ago. And it was really, really difficult on me. My mom and I were very close, and it was unexpected. And like by now I'd spent about 10 years in the field of addiction, getting people sober. And I would tell people like, my job is to give people hope.
Right.
It's 30 days to try to find a light in you and plug it into something. And so I got called down to the hospital, and looking back, what had happened is mom had a blood clot travel up her leg and blow up in her heart.
Oof.
But when she got to the hospital, they did a stroke test. And at that moment in time, she passed the stroke test, and they didn't know what it was, but she was talking in a fugue state, like a real high little girl. And I went running in there, and she was just out of it. My mom had the same eyes as my brother. They're real pale blue. And she was like this little girl's voice going, it hurts, it hurts.
Wow.
And I said, Mom, I'm here now. What hurts? And she stopped, and I was so grateful for this moment. She stopped and grabbed my hands and looked directly at me and said, honey, how did you know to come? So me being me, I crack a joke. I'm like, well, I said if you went to the hospital without telling me, I was going to move in with you and bring tape. And normally that would make her laugh. And went right back into that fugue state. And I stood there like so helpless because I couldn't give her hope. I couldn't take her pain away. And then I saw her eyes fix on the ceiling, and she flatlined. And they worked on her mother for like, this is what the truth does to you. My mom, they're working on her in teams of 3, and they would work for about 5 minutes and then have to switch out because it's such an exertion. My mom was completely naked and covered by a sheet. And I sometimes the sheet would come down and I could hear him cracking her ribs. And I'm watching this whole thing, and all I can think is cover her up. She wouldn't want anybody to see her like this.
Right.
You're in a bed. Please don't let anyone see her like this.
Right.
That's how modest my mother was. And anyway, I finally called it because it just was not good. And I was the only kid there. And so all the family comes out, and my dad had passed many years ago. And for a moment in time, it was us denial kids, and we were all together. And I kind of felt like it was us against the world again, and I had a seat at the table again.
Right.
And so, unbeknownst to me, my mom had put Carlin in charge of the will, and we went through the week of funerals, and all these people came. There must have been like 500 people, came through to pay their respects.
Wow.
My mom was loved. She was quite a person, and you're just suddenly back in like the truth land.
It's like all those people you're saying, it's all from the 2x2s coming from all over because your dad had a high position.
Awkward.
That's wild.
And Carlin had married by now and had kids, and we through the process of me getting my life together and going to work in the field of addiction, I had made peace with everyone. Mm-hmm. So Carlin in my 30s probably I started speaking to him again about 30.
Okay.
And we had a cordial, nice relationship. But that day when he took my inheritance, and my brother Kim, my Korean brother Kim, who I love, he's been more of a brother to me than any of them. He pulled me off to the side and he said, "They're going to take your money." And I said, "They can't take my money. I saw what Mom said, divided between 5, and he said they're going to." And so everybody was leaving. The funeral was over, and we'd had a week of, festivities, or, well, not festive, but whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I went up the next morning to Mom's house, and I said to Carlin, "Kim tells me that you've read the will, and I haven't, and I would like to see a copy of it." And he looked at me, and his eyes, those blue eyes, kind of changed. They weren't black, but I saw like a real hard look come over him. Mm-hmm. And he walked into the back, and I kid you not, he came out with the will and he flicked it across the table at me like I was just a piece of garbage. And I looked at him and I'm like, "You don't get to keep my money." And I saw in him that day, that was 10 years ago, I saw something that wasn't my brother that I knew growing up. It was whatever was in him was growing, I feel.
Right.
And I don't, if it's mental illness, I don't know if there was things going on, but that kid that I grew up with, he wouldn't have done that.
Right.
And so Paul, my ex, was in the middle of a big election, mm-hmm. and my recourse at that time was to sue. And so we had a lot of conflicts back and forth. Did I need the money? If I sue, they're going to use that against us in a political campaign. Greedy Tami Pacheco, Sue's own family.
Right.
I mean, believe me, that political headlines, it's a nightmare.
Right.
And after 3 or 4 months, I made the decision. I honestly wanted him to do the right thing. And I kept thinking he'll do the right thing. I believed that he would ultimately do the right thing, and he did not.
So people watching will see why this relationship with your brother is so important, what it's going to be culminating to shortly. Yeah. But then going back to when you're in high school, what you witnessed with your brother after the breakup, were you experiencing this type of evil stuff with other people, like seeing people change or, abuse?
Yes and no. So not at the time. And so with Carlin, there were just moments like that. And that's critical to this story just because of where we wound up.
Yep.
But for my personally, Kate gave me notes and told me to stay on task.
To say what?
Kate gave me notes and told me to stay on task. I'm like, well, what?
No, you're doing great. You're doing great.
Check my timeline over here. So when I was 17, 18, when I left home, I went out one night with my friend, and she was meeting a guy. I was always the designated driver. And so we went square dancing or country western dancing at a big western nightclub there. And she was dating a guy. And so we closed the bar down, and she decided to ride home with him. And she told me, give me 5 minutes or so we can make out in the parking lot or whatever. And then we were going to go to her apartment. So it's 2:00 in the morning, and I'm driving around waiting for her, and I run out of gas. Now, I hadn't been out on my own very long, so I don't have the same sense of danger that normal people do. Mm-hmm. I just know the whole world is supposed to be bad. And so far, I think they're all full of shit.
Right.
So I was kind of fearless.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, oh, I got to push my car. I got to get it out of the road. So this guy rolls up and he had it was a Lincoln Continental. I've always been a car person. To this day, I know all cars. And I remember thinking to myself, and he was dressed nice. He was a Hispanic man, probably in his 40s, and he smelled nice. And he said, "Can I help you push your car?" And I said, "Yeah, you can." And I thought, he kind of passed my little innocent check mark. Why would a predator help me push my car? And we get it up on the parking lot, and he says, "Can I give you a ride home?" And I swear to God, I looked over at my friend's apartment and I thought, she's probably in bed. I stood there looking at her apartment thinking I should walk across the street to her apartment. And then I thought, it's been an hour. She's probably in bed. By now it was like 3:00. Mm-hmm. And I looked at him and he said, "I can give you a ride. You shouldn't be out here late at night." And I said, "Okay." So we get to the parking lot of my apartment complex, and we just made small talk on the way home. And we get there and I go to open the door. I didn't even see his hand, and he went boom, and he hit me right in the nose and broke my nose, and then grabbed my hair and crashed my head into the window. And he sexually assaulted me that night, beat me within an inch of my life, dumped me out in my own parking lot, and told me not to tell anyone, or he knew where I lived, he'd come back. Oh, wow. And that guy turned out to be, I was his first victim. He turned out to be a serial killer, the Northeast Heights rapist who went on to kill.
Holy crap.
Why he didn't kill me, I have no idea.
This evil just seems to follow you, Tami.
It's this weird thing. And so in seeking why and trying to figure out, I went with my mom. So here's another example of the truth in action. My boyfriend in California was a California highway patrolman. He got in his truck and drove straight out. Like I didn't even know to call the cops. Right. That's how sheltered. Yeah. You know what I mean? I'm like, what do I do? And I was like sobbing, right. And they called the cops from California, and he just got in his truck and drove. And when he got in, he said, "We have to tell your mom and dad." And I'm like, no, you don't understand. No, we're not telling them. And he said, "You have to tell your mom and dad. I would want to know." And I said, "Look, I'll tell my mom. I will not tell my dad." So we go and we go to lunch, and I walk in. This is the depth of the roots of the truth. My nose is broken. My eyes are black and blue. And I walk in and I give my mom a hug, and I said, "I need to tell you something. Something really bad happened." And she leaned forward and said, "You're pregnant."
Does this look like I'm pregnant? Right.
No. And then I told her, I said, and then I looked at Mark and I'm like, "I told you I shouldn't tell them." Right. And I said to her, "No, it's a little worse than that. I was raped." And she started sobbing, and I'm the victim. And I said, Mom, I reached over and I took her hand and I said, Mom, look, it'll be okay. It's okay. And she said to me, "No, it is not okay. It has never been okay with you, and it never will be okay with you." And an 18-year-old child, that imprinted on my heart. And, oh, look, that's bringing up emotion. I set out for the next decade to live exactly like that. Wow. That I wasn't okay, and I would never be okay. And I'm telling you, only God did that for me, got me through that. God has made such a difference. And for me to be able to stand today with everything I know and still not hate religion and still not hate God.
Yeah. I was going to ask you that, because you had a kind of twisted upbringing in terms of how they teach the New Testament. So you never really, obviously you shed the 2x2 religion, but you didn't lose religion altogether.
I didn't really lose my relationship with God. And I don't know why. I can't explain that, except that I just always loved God, and I hated all religion for what they made the people do, if that makes any sense.
Right.
I felt I was trained to hate the Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these fancy churches, they're all, you know, that's definitely not what God wants.
Right.
So stepped away from it all. And through the process of recovery and learn, like that's one thing about AA that I will forever be grateful for is so many people have been able to come in and get help by just opening up the concept of a power greater than yourself.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you really pay attention to what it says in the books, it really is all about God. They have a line in the book that says God either is or he isn't. And that was my issue on the subject of demons. So we believe in God,
Mm-hmm.
and we believe in Jesus, and we believe that Jesus is coming back, but we don't believe in demons. Well, are we supernatural or are we not?
Right.
You
Right.
know, my questions just never got answered for me. Nobody could answer them. They were just like, "Oh no, it doesn't work that way now, Tami. There's not demons." And I'm like, "Well, what about the things I've seen?
Right.
Why are people doing the things that they've done?" You know, so I quit talking to them about it. But I found people. I still wouldn't label the truth as a cult. I just said it was just the religion that my parents, you know, grew up in. And when the murder happened, and we'll get to that. One of the interesting things was my brother was diagnosed in the year of COVID with the same disease that Bruce Willis has. So
Right.
it's a real rare dementia.
Right.
And like in my brother's case, his memory was not affected. So sometimes it's not diagnosed right away because it doesn't have the same markers as Alzheimer's and so probably things had been going on for a long time, and his wife Connie didn't tell any of us because you tend to sort of keep that. He was a very proud man.
Mm-hmm.
And after mom died, he became an elder in the church. And I find out that the way you become an elder in the church is through gifting.
Right.
If you have things.
Right.
So it's interesting for me to find out that the inheritance that was taken from me,
That's where it went.
and he became an elder.
Right.
And
You have to give away everything, right? Isn't that what a lot of them do?
well,
I mean, everything in quotes, you know?
my brother was an electrician. My brother lived in a beautiful home. My brother made a lot of money. My
Right.
brother, you know, but the more you give, and the money that they took from me for him, that was a good use of it. They gave, mom had just bought, I don't think it was a Lincoln. It was a quintessential old person's car. One of the nice Lincoln Marquis, or, you know, top of the line, like big bomber caddy that old people like to drive.
Right.
Like, I was supposed to get that car. There were several things that I was supposed to get, which I didn't really care about the car other than sentimental, but he gave that all to the workers. And the next thing you know, he now has a meeting in his home in Tucson, and he is the elder, you know. And I've always been very conflicted in talking about Carlin because he has two beautiful children that I love very, very, very much.
Mm-hmm.
And it's difficult to see anything negative about their dad.
Right.
But my story is my story, and what happened to me happened. And I think if we're ever going to make sense of it, I look at, this is kind of off topic, but like I look at the Olympics,
Mm-hmm.
that shit show of an opening.
That was crazy.
I'm like, if you had told me 3 years ago that I would suddenly see demonic influence everywhere, I would have said you're. And it's like once the veil is lifted and once you start seeing and start asking questions, you can't unring that bell.
And I would encourage you to go back and watch other Olympic openings from the last 10 years, and I think you'll see demonic things in them. You know, there's that one from 2012 where the kids are in the hospital beds getting injected and ghouls flying around. It's pretty wild. And I think COVID woke a lot of people up to how depraved people can get, especially those in power. And now people are rewatching that and being like, that's interesting. That's not right at all.
When you start looking, you take someone like me who I've been non-religious my whole life, very God connected, very spiritual. Like I've done a lot to keep myself close to God,
Right.
but I was really uncomfortable saying Jesus,
Right.
and saying I've accepted Jesus Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, like, why am I uncomfortable saying that? Like, what is it? Like, it just always like icky to me.
Right.
Like, just let me do the spiritual thing. And then the murder happens, and my son finds Christ.
Let's
And
let's get to that story now. So when the murder happens, is this after we were talking before we went live about leaving California? Is that so?
It's before
the murder's
so
before.
The year of COVID, Carlin was diagnosed with FTD.
Yep. Okay.
None of us knew, and my sister called me. I was in Albuquerque, still married at the time, and I get a call, and they said that Carlin had gone missing for like 7 hours, and they were in Scottsdale at the Mayo Clinic trying to get a diagnosis. They'd gone back and forth numerous times. They ruled out like Parkinson's and the usual things that you figure out when somebody starts acting goofy.
Yeah.
And I guess he like took the car and just disappeared. So unbeknownst to her, Carlin's lost a bunch of weight, and he's very thin. And I hadn't seen him in a number of years. And even the last time I saw him, I thought he looked odd. I remember we were at the bookstore, Barnes & Noble, and we ran into him and Connie, and Tate got to see him. And all of us commented how thin he looked, that he didn't look like himself. And so that was a year before. And then COVID happened. He gets, right as the lockdowns went, he made it back to the house. And here's the interesting thing. So this disease that they have disconnects emotion. And Carlin's whole world was connected to his status in the truth. So my sister called me and said that he had made it back home, but they had to call for help, and the cops were there, and he was being taken to the psych ward. He had curled up in the fetal position and was pounding on his chest and saying, "I can't find my soul. I can't find my soul." I remember thinking, "Oh, wow, that's an interesting choice of words." Mm-hmm. And I told my sister, the truth is everything to him. And so, if something's happened, right at that point, I'm thinking it's the disease and mental illness. And I'm thinking he's probably cognizant enough to know that it cut him off, that he's not feeling the same things that he felt, and he's feeling hurt and angry and scared around that. And so he was there for like 3 weeks. And again, my role, like I don't step in unless they ask me to, and they wouldn't release him because I don't know.
Right.
Psych wards. And so I told my sister to tell Connie, she needed me to step in and get him home to let me know. And so after about 3 weeks, Connie called and said, "Would you help?" And I got my doctor that ran my treatment facility, and we got him on a medical transport home. And I want to tell you that when he took my inheritance, it broke my heart again. And I didn't speak to him for another 4 or 5 years.
Right.
And I was the one that picked it. So they're the Christians, right? Mm-hmm. They're the people with God. I'm the sinner. But the backpack of anger I had that I was carrying was like weighing me down. I used to liken it to belly crawling with a big thing of rocks on my, that's what it felt like. Like I was angry at them all. Like, fuck you all, man. Yep. And finally I knew that like, if I didn't make peace, I was the one hurting. They're not thinking about me. Mm-hmm. They're all living their lives going, "Oh, Tammy's in another one of her moods." Right. And so I sent my brother, it was first year Trump was running. I sent my brother a text and I said, "Do you have a minute to talk?" And he'll never know, of course, that I sat on that in front of the ocean on a bench. And it took me about half an hour to pick up the phone and even text him because I didn't want to, because I was with them all. Yeah. But I was like, "God, I can do this. You give me the strength. I can do this." So I send the text, and he sends me back a text and says, "Not if you're going to be digging up bones." And I almost threw my phone in the ocean. I was like, "You know what? Screw you." Right. And then I was like, "No, this is a mission. You've been directed to do it." So I said, I threw away my shovel. So he calls me, and we talked about Trump. I don't know. But that opened the door. So now you fast forward, and I'm helping my brother come home. And I had such a rush of gratitude because I thought if he had died and I had not been able to tell him I forgive him, I don't know how I would have felt. That's where my heart was,
It would haunt you.
I got to tell him that, and it was real weird talking to him because he seems normal, right? hi, Tami. And, we talk and I'm looking at him going, oh my God, you are whacked out, son. So he goes into that facility and they got him diagnosed properly and regulated. And and the lockdown has been on for about 4 months now. Part of his behavior patterns were trying to harm himself. So while he was in the hospital, I had to go to their house and help Connie get rid of all knives, all sharp objects, because Connie didn't have a clue. It's like when you need something to be found in your house, you want me, because I'm used to drug addicts and I can toss a house better than anybody. I know where they hide it. I know every trick in the book. And, that's kind of how it was with him. He was an electrician and he had probably 1,000 different knives in his garage and storage and whatever. And also, let me say, the man never was a hunter. The man never went hunting a day in his life. So note that. But
and real quick, Connie was a part of the 2x2s. Everyone in the family was in it. Yeah.
My mother loved her. And when I was a lot younger, before I did all the work and sat down with them all at various times and talked about, why we were estranged and I came into that whole thing in my 30s is when I was moved to try to make peace with my family. And I just went in from a place, I'm sorry if I wasn't a good sister. And that I did that were harmful or hurt you, I'm really sorry. And that sort of opened the door for us all to have, I don't think they ever said they were sorry for much of anything. My mom did. My mom and I talked. My mom was fantastic. My mom, I asked her if she remembered the conversation about the rape. And this is when I knew, this is the moment. Like if you're a parent and something happens and you say something off the cuff to your kid and the kid imprints on it and you have no idea. I said to my mom, do you remember what you said to me? And she goes, no. Right. And I told her and she started crying and said, well, what did I mean? And I had this like moment of clarity. Oh my God, you just were a pervert.
Right.
You were horrified and blurted something out. And my dumb ass took that and said, yeah, I'm worth nothing. Right. I have no.
Yeah. You created a whole identity out of something that was just, flippant from your mom.
From pain.
Yeah.
And that's how dumb, that's how we get caught in these like cycles. But with Carlin then, Connie Connie backed him up on the whole inheritance thing. So I was really angry with Connie too for a long time. And I had not really talked with Connie up until he got put in the hospital. I talked with Carlin and I made my peace with Carlin. But the thing is that Connie's role in that was, I felt like when Mom died, she co-signed Carlin's bullshit, for lack of a better way of saying it. And she was wrong. And so I always feel like, if my husband had done that to his sister, I might not have been able to change the outcome, but I'd been up on it. Right. And I'd been like, that's not right, Paul. Don't do that. That'll come back to bite you. Right. Don't take things yours. So I didn't have a lot of fond feelings around Connie, and I felt I would just had never. And then I saw her pain, and I saw how horrified she was at my brother, and she didn't know what to do. And like my heart just like there was so much compassion because this is a man that she loved him. She was a good, kind, pure soul. She just. They're taught that way. They're brainwashed.
As he's getting sick, is he allowed to still be an elder? Is he allowed to be giving sermons or whatever you call it?
At some point that stopped. Because he didn't want to go. And so I didn't know that though. See, nobody said anything.
Right. Wow.
So he just slowly stopped going to meetings. Didn't feel good.
Wow.
And then of course when the diagnosis came out, then they tried to bring him to meeting because they thought maybe he would enjoy it, and he didn't want to leave the house. Right. And it was a very different Carlin from that point on. And I saw things with him. Our whole game during COVID, I lived right by them in my IOP center was very close to Connie's house. So if something went down, she would call me and I'd rush over there because we were trying to keep him out of the psych ward, because at that time, Carlin wasn't cognizant enough to be able to use a cell phone or call out.
Mm-hmm.
So if he fucked up, like for the 3 weeks he was in there, they had no communication. And we were all afraid he would die in there by himself because they weren't let people visit, you know. So it became kind of our secret mission just to keep him out of the psych ward. And so I would be called, and I got very, very close to Connie. She gave me all of his medical paperwork, and I got to review it with my doctor, who really was helpful in helping me understand FTD and the differences between with FTD. It appears as though, like with Alzheimer's and dementia, the brain dies off. This little pieces just atrophy off. So like one day I know you, the next day I don't, because that might be the piece that died.
Erased.
Well, in this disease, it appears to kind of start atrophying at the edges of the brain. And then, of course, ultimately death. Right. And they give the expectancy about seven years. So who knows how long Carlin actually had it. Right. But I was over there one day, and we were trying to get him to the doctor, and he wouldn't go. And Connie called me and said, "Can you help?" And I buzzed over there. And now bear in mind, this man weighed about 100 pounds. And
wow.
She's like, "Carlin, you need to go. We don't want you to go back to the hospital. So we need to go talk to this doctor." And he looked at her and he goes, "I'm going to hurt you." And like, at the time, like I almost laughed, because I was like, I can thump you and knock you over.
You're so little. Yeah.
You know, after the way it turned out. So I wondered, in hindsight, looking back, how many of those times happened for poor Connie, and she didn't talk about it. And she's trained well, you know, to protect him. And he was kind of status quo there for a couple of years. And he didn't mind one-on-one people coming over, but he didn't like crowds. Mm-hmm. And so a year ago Thanksgiving, like 2 years this Thanksgiving, the kids were going to go to their in-laws' houses, and Connie had invited me and Tate, myself, and my younger brother, who lives out here in Texas. So she just wanted to try out a small get-together and see if that worked for Carlin. And, you know, we'd been planning that for a week, and my brother came in from town, and Tate came in from Florida. And that day, Darren, my brother, he had his 7-year-old twins with him. And my brother, Darren, is not in the truth. He's in AA. So it's kind of like the truth. Just a matter of fact.
Healthier version.
There's some hypocrisy in there too, but I do love AA better than the truth. But anyway, he drove straight to their house, and I get a call from him. I'm in my hotel, and Tate's in the hotel, and we get a call, and he's like, "They're not answering." And I said, "You know what? She may be showering him. You know, she may be helping him shower." And I said, "Just ring the bell again." And so he rings the bell again and goes around, tries the doors, and then he calls me and he says, "I'm coming to get you," which is always, by the way, with any of my brother's siblings, it's always go get Tami.
Yeah.
If there's something going down, go get Tami.
Right.
The one you want in a crisis, you know. So anyway, Tate looked at me and he said, "Mom, this is going to be bad." And I said, "No, it's not. I don't think so. I don't feel that." And he's like, "Mom, it's going to be bad. I'm just telling you." He goes, "You don't think Carlin would do something, do you?" And I'm like, "No." And honest to God, this is what I thought. Remember the Mexican tourist deaths with the carbon monoxide? They'd had several of them. They had like just random people dying at, you know.
Right.
For some reason that flashed in my head. I knew somebody would be dead.
Right.
But it just turned on their heater, and for some reason I just talked myself into believing that it was going to be carbon monoxide.
Wow.
And I called PD and I asked them, and by the way, Albuquerque PD mocks itself off everything California does. You just move from one blue state to the other. So cops are not cops in Albuquerque anymore.
Great.
And Breaking Bad makes me think of that.
It's so bad. I mean, it's not a good time to be a cop. But so I call PD and say, "Look, I need a welfare check. Please come do a welfare check." And they won't come. And they literally, I was on the phone with them for 45 minutes, and they literally said, "Yeah, we don't want to risk our officers' lives." Okay. And I'm like, I'm like, my brother has a mental illness. We
Right.
need to get in the house. We've been planning this. We haven't had contact since
Right.
5:30. We have our phones. It's like the last time
Yeesh.
somebody heard me, 5:30 the night before. And so we take the door off the hinges and go in, and not a single smell of Thanksgiving. You know how you walk in and you can smell turkey and all the sage, all the silent, deathly quiet. And they had this beautiful, very, very nice home. And Tate and my brother, thank God he left the twins in the car. He goes off, they go kind of over by the kitchen, and me, always on a mission, I beeline it right for, I'm going to get to the bottom of it and get this problem solved, as it were. And I go straight to the master bedroom, and I open up the door, and my sister-in-law's head is at my feet. And I'm like, and then I look over, and there's an arm, and I don't know what I can't quite take it in. Yeah. Taylor said him and Darren heard me say 3 times, almost like I was speaking to a dog, no. I do not remember saying that. I don't know how long I was there. I was just looking at this. And there was food everywhere. And she was in pieces and disemboweled. And so the bed is right there. I didn't even see him. I guess when he had disemboweled her, the knife had slipped and cut his groin. Wow. And he had started bleeding out. And then he also had cut his own neck. And he had fallen back on the bed. So he's laying on the bed. I don't even see him. I'm just standing there, like, trying to figure out what I'm seeing. And all of a sudden, he sits up on the bed. And as God is my witness, it was a demon. Wow. He sat up, and we locked eyes. And I went, and I just real slowly, never leaving his eyes, backed out, shut the door, and went, get out. And of course, the whole thing unfolded. And
did he stay in the room? What?
Well, the cops came, and by now they decided to come, of course, because they're on the phone, and they're like, because when I came out, all I could say is, I think he dismembered her.
Jesus.
I just kept repeating that because I was just, and I don't shake, and I was shaking. I just couldn't even wrap myself around what imagine.
That's such a horror.
So then I felt like, so now we have the SWAT team. We got the whole area cordoned off. The helicopters are flying. The news is out. Nancy Grace is calling. Dateline's calling. It's a nightmare. And Tate and I moved across the street. They had us all back. And I felt like the cops might shoot him when he came out. I kept telling him, look, he weighs like 90 pounds. He's in there by himself. I mean, I can go in and get him if you guys are scared to. I mean, go in there and get him. Like, what are we waiting? I mean, they were flying drones and stuff. I'm like, oh, for God's sakes.
Right.
I guess from their vantage point, it was a homicidal maniac.
For sure.
But, anyway, we were watching when they finally got him out. He was completely naked, and he was covered in blood from here down. He looked like Peter on it. And he was so not my brother that Tate and I looked at each other and we went, somebody else did it. It's not Carlin.
Oh, wow.
And they took him down to the ground. And in that movement, it's almost like he kind of almost morphed back into Carlin. Like when he came out, he was smaller. Like he didn't look like, it was just really weird. Like, and I thought at the moment in time that I was the only one that had seen that, and Tate was the same way. Like we both had like this instantaneous, oh, it's not Carlin. And then when they took him down and he turned his head, I saw his face again, and I could see the blueness of his eyes, and I'm like, oh no, it is. Oh, he did do that. This is not good. So they take him to the hospital and save his life. And he has these big stitches up his neck, and
wow.
And they have him at UNMH, and they have him shackled to the bed with a cop posted up because he's a murderer.
Yeah.
And so I guess he wasn't. He didn't want to take meds, and he was refusing to eat. So the officers called me and asked. The lieutenant called and asked if I would come down and sit with him. And they didn't want his kids because they felt, that they might be emotionally compromised and, maybe kill him or help him commit suicide. And which of course they would, they're lovely, lovely kids. And I mean, you know,
Were they home for that whole thing?
They could be worried that they're going to be next.
Oh, okay.
they're both, Dylan just graduated law school, and he was with his wife in San Diego, and then their daughter Lisa was with her husband. And so that's why it was just this real small, and I'm so grateful that I went in and not them. Can you imagine?
Right.
Oh. So I said to the cops, I called to see, does anybody want to go down and sit with them? They want him to eat, and nobody would go, which, again, from a Christian standpoint, wouldn't you want to go pray over him?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, only one. I went and sat beside him every day. Not one person from the truth went to see him.
I was
No
gonna
one
ask.
asked.
Yeah, how did the cult deal with that?
They just said it's not him. He died a long time ago. It's not him. And I'm like, well, who is it then? So are we saying that we believe in demons now? Oh no, it's just the mental illness. And I'd be like, well, what is mental illness? I mean, I know a lot about mental illness, but
Right.
you know, I know a lot of mentally ill people that don't chop up and dismember their wives.
For sure.
You know? Anyway, but I was happy too, you know, because I wanted somebody who loved God to be there, and I wanted to tell him that he was forgiven. It was really important to me.
Wow.
So went and sat with him every day until he died, and he wouldn't take their meds. They did give him meds. They gave him pain meds, and we had to fight for the DNR to be, the living will to be honored, because the cops had decided that they wanted to make a case. And the thing is, with this disease, when you're talking to him, he seems really rational. So they thought he might be playing crazy. And he told them exactly what he did and why he did it. And he told me the same thing. And he would come in and out of Looneyville. And when, like I say, when the demon was there, he was clear and concise. His eyes were black, and he would talk about the murder. And he said that he had been planning it for 10 years.
Wow.
That's when my mom died.
Wow.
I don't believe he was planning it for 10 years. I believe the mental illness started then, or whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
Because that day when he flicked the wheel at me, his eyes were different.
Right.
That day. I remember, and I'd seen that lightly a couple of other times.
Sheesh.
And I remember thinking to myself at the time, like, who are you? Like, where's my brother, and what have you done with him? But then some of my conversations with him would just be typical Alzheimer-y. Like, you know, he would start talking sexually, or, you know, would you stick your finger or whatever? And I'd be like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then, but he would always preface it with, that's not a very Christian thing. Then he brings up the money, and he literally tells me that he took my money. And by the way, I would sit and record our conversations because he would talk real fast. We're Italian anyway, so we all talk fast, but I would think to myself, I'll never remember this. And I wasn't supposed to be asking him anything about the murder, but the cops after the first day just left us alone.
Right.
And so every day I would go in and I would say, do you know where you are? And he would say, yes. And I'd say, where are you? And he'd say, the hospital. Do you know why you're here? And he'd say, yes. And why are you here? And he'd be like a sheepish little boy, and he'd be like, because I hurt everybody. And I'm like, who specifically did you hurt? And he would say, Connie. So when it was Carlin, that's the mental disease part. That was just him talking.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, morph into, like, just all of a sudden his voice would change, and he would start talking about the actual murders and why he did it. Or he would talk about killing in general, or swords. Like, he did this with a very small knife that he had managed to hide somewhere.
Wow.
And he's that day he woke up and he said, today's the day. And he got up before Connie and he went in. Oh, let me just back up real quick. So I learned this later that about 3 months before the murder, they got a new brain doc. And that doc, for whatever reasons, decided to take him off as the one med. And he said, you know, I think he'll have a better quality of life and not be so, like, drugged up, kind of like the Thorazine shuffle, if different type of med. And I learned from his daughter later that Connie, in the next couple of weeks, had started to see the old behaviors coming back. And I said, like what? And she said that he like repetitively would get up and go stand in front of a mirror and say, get out, get out.
Wow.
And then he would down and then he would go up. And so I didn't know any of that. Like, you know, I grieve for Connie because she loved him and that's what killed her. You know what I mean? She didn't think he would ever hurt her. She thought she could handle him. And you can't handle, you know, people that have that kind of demonic evil lurking around. And he said that, so he got up that day and he went in the bathroom and he said he wanted, these are his words. And this is where my year and a half with Tate of trying to figure out what is the devil and what are demons and what does the Bible say and how does this apply to this thing I grew up in and why and how, because it makes it, but the verbiage, I keep hearing the same verbiage. So he said, I wanted to create as much suffering as possible. He planned on killing us all. So he walked over where she sleep in bed and he slit her throat and said, she fought like the Dickens, but I did a number on her.
Wow.
And he kind of leaned forward when he said it.
Wow.
And you're like, and then he said he felt like he ought to suffer a little too. So he nicked his neck.
Sheesh. Tami,
And
real quick, it's 7. Do we have a caller?
We have one caller.
Tami, would you mind? Typically, we would end it here because we're an hour and a half in. But would you mind sticking around while we take a caller and then we continue from here? Because I still want to talk about the FBI investigation and you know where you're at now. And I feel like we still have more to talk about. So if you don't mind, we're
a
gonna
little intermission.
We'll do a little call.
Sort of.
We'll take a call real quick, and we'll come back to you.
okay, do I have time to go wash my hands?
Oh yeah,
course.
yeah. If you want to mute, you can mute yourself on your end and just listen for us when we come back.
Okay.
Thank you. Let's do that because I want to hear. We have more to cover.
Let's go. Oh, King. I don't know. The king is coming.
The king. Uh-oh. Are you
with
there?
us, King?
Mute yourself on your end. And,
It's from.
He's low.
Okay.
oh, sorry about that.
Oh,
I
you
couldn't
are?
hear you.
What-
Man, I've been like hypnotized by this episode.
I know, it's insane.
My story's gonna pale in comparison. Such a strong woman.
Oh man, this is wild. But I know you've been waiting, and I don't want to keep.
No,
you,
I don't mind at all. You know, honestly, if you want to let her keep talking, I can call back another time.
No,
this
man.
this
No.
is far more important. My
I think-
story's gonna pale in
let's-
comparison.
Well, it'd be good to take a little breather because that.
It's gonna.
Yeah, working up to that, the murder is just it's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
I think we could all just take like a few minutes to decompress
Yeah.
from that insane scene that Tami went through. But
No, I gotta say, man, this has been the best episode for
Oh,
sure.
That's all, man.
It's my
Thank
welcome
you.
back episode.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Tami, I knew immediately once I got her email that she was gonna have a very special, alarming, haunting, crazy story. So yeah, I'm glad you're here to share your story because your email was also interesting to me. So yeah, take your time, tell us what you've got, what you went through.
Well, first of all, I want to say it's strange because the TAMI is a very
Are you talking to me?
unique way to spell that, and my wife's name is that as well. So it's really crazy for me. I feel like sort of a connection.
Right, that's weird. That's weird. And Tami, if you can hear us, sorry, Tami, we are still talking to the caller. We'll be back, and just listen for us. But that's a weird thing. So yeah, take it away.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, basically, it's a out of body experience in my story. But I don't know if you can like categorize that as like astral projection. But I guess any like soul movement outside of the body is that.
Could be, yeah.
But
Were
I
you
used
in
to
control of
explain
it?
my experiences as dreams, so I didn't go crazy. And then, like and it was easier for me to make others understand if I had to tell the story just to get it off my chest.
Right.
So I tell them it was a crazy dream, but these dreams are always very real and very visceral. Because you know, like how dreams are kind of usually just fragmented and they kind of disappear over time, and you have little puzzle pieces, but it's not like a complete story.
Absolutely.
But these ones, like I said, they're visceral, and they're always the outcomes of like abduction experiences that I've kind of put together over the time. From who I don't know and why is just as big a mystery as well. But I'll start with this one. I was laying down in bed to go to bed. I'd usually get in late from work, and my wife and kids were fast asleep. So I crept into bed, this night to not wake anyone up. But as soon as I lay down, I felt like I was sucked up to the ceiling. The next thing I remember, I was in a round powder blue room, what looked like bubbles just moving inside the walls, which is kind of weird to me.
Yeah.
And I was on a white solid table, but unable to move anything but my head and neck area and eyes. Those are the only parts I can move. I looked around kind of the best I could to try and figure out what the hell was happening. And as I was doing that, a figure walked up behind me and then gently placed the palms of each of their hands on each side of my head and ears. And I immediately calmed down. And I heard a voice say, "Just relax. You won't be harmed. In fact, you earned a trip." And I was like, "What?" And then the next thing I know, another humanoid, but he was huge. I mean, 8 feet, maybe even taller, and just appeared, walked above, to the end of the table I was on, bent over. And I'm guessing their feet were planted on the floor because it looked like they were just standing over me, but they were massive. I couldn't make out any faces, but the one standing over me pointed at my chest and started to swirl their index finger in a clockwise motion. And suddenly what looked like milk started to rise out of my chest and resembled Milky Way galaxy or some sort of spiral like in ancient art you see on pictographs and things like that.
Right.
And then the next thing I knew, I was just floating above my house, and the voice again said to look at myself and try to fly around. All I had to do was think about which direction and how fast, and it would happen. Well, I first looked down at myself, my body, and I could see I still had all the parts, but they were translucent, kind of color blue, like a Force ghost in Star Wars is the best way I can explain it. I remember thinking, well, that's weird, but then I thought maybe I should go check out the park and just immediately floated towards it because I have a park near my house. The voice said, "That's good, but don't you want to look at something you've never seen?" And I was like, "Sure," in my head. And then the voice said, "Check out the top of the earth, head towards the moon." I was like, "Okay," because it was in the middle of the night and it was a full moon that night. So I kind of snickered and I was like, "Yeah, right." And I thought about it and started rocketing towards the moon, straight up.
Wow.
I zipped through the clouds and got where space would start, and I suddenly hit a barrier, like a glass or thick plastic dome, and made a hollow plastic sound and a cartoonish wooden road sign that would be in a Looney Tunes show. And it just appeared in front of me, and in my head I heard Verboten, which means forbidden in German. I don't know why I heard that, but I heard that one. But then the voice that I was hearing, it told me I wasn't allowed to leave unless I was tethered to a guide with access. So a little iron ring appeared on the right ankle because I looked down and felt it. And he said, "You can head to the moon now." And I was like, "Okay." And I went really slow so I wouldn't hit my head again. And as soon as we cleared the barrier that I thought I was going to hit again, I felt almost an intense warmth and the strongest feeling of love and content that I'd ever felt. And suddenly I was aware of so many things that were mysteries that I was like, wow, I know that, but I would never be aware of normally. And of course I don't remember any of it now because once I was returned, they said I wouldn't remember it anyway. The voice also in my head said, "Head to the moon." So I did, and it looked like all the images we were familiar with craters and gray rocky surface from the distance. But when I entered the moon's atmosphere, the sky turned to a saffron color, and there was tall green grass and rolling hills as far as I could see. It was super windy, and the currents from the wind carried me all over the surface, and it was an exhilarating roller coaster ride, really. I was having fun. After a bit, I got yanked up by a guide, whoever the voice was, and it said to orient myself and feel the earth with my hands. Again, I was like, "What?" And I said, "Okay." And then the voice said, "Think about it." And when I did, my ether body, or whatever it was, it grew to the size of Galactus from the Silver Surfer comics.
Of course.
And I can fit earth in both hands, and it felt mossy, moist, and it vibrated with life. It was really weird, but I just knew it.
Wow.
And then the next thing I know, we're hovering over the planet Mars. He like zipped us over there, and the voice said, "Feel it." And again, I did with my hands, and it felt like a fragile, sharp, like volcanic rock, but it did vibrate with life. But it was like this feeling inside, like made me think it was inside, deep in the planet, like there was like things hiding inside of it. And then the next time, like right after that, the guide grabbed my hand and we were floating above Jupiter. It was like a flash. And again, the voice said, "Try to touch the planet." And I started to reach out again, but suddenly, like, I had the most terrifying fear. I was frozen and couldn't do it, no matter how hard I tried to I finally decided I didn't want to. I was like, you know what, this is not a good idea. And then the guide said, "Interesting." Like those like totally stood out. I was like, "Interesting. Well, I'll see you later." And I zipped, and then suddenly I just like zipped all the way back to Earth. And I could see my house getting closer and closer and closer. And then somehow I was able to see my bed through the roof. Or my body through the roof, sorry. And I slammed back to my body. So instead of like falling asleep, I fell awake.
Wow.
I sat up, looked around, and then next thing I knew, I blacked out. And then the morning happened.
That's
Weird.
wild.
And that was it.
That's wild. It's odd that because I think we talked maybe yesterday or the day before, and you mentioned the astral projection bit, and that had been in my mind because I started the show tonight talking about the guy who survived that cult, right?
Yeah. That's why I was like, wow.
Before he started that cult, before he went into that cult and I started it, he was lost in an astral projection. He would tell me, like, he was in college, and he would talk about being visited by someone who kind of like what you're saying, a guide, but he thought the guide was his friend, and he would go astral project there all the time and be in this place. Kind of sounds similar to you because it's like cosmic and, especially that like the rolling hills type thing. So after doing that for so long, some other voice, according to him, came from behind his shoulder and said, you've been talking to the devil. And that the person he thought was his friend who wanted to keep him there, according to his other voice, was the devil. And that was the last time he did that. And then he joined a cult.
Well, the devil is Kings and Rainbows.
Yeah, that's weird that when I saw the astral projection thing, I had been thinking about the cult episode and thinking about that guy. So
you got a cult on your mouth.
That's a
yeah.
really
I'm never going to
wild.
start a cult, so I'm going to promise you that.
Yeah, stay far away.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But that's a wild story, man. I appreciate you sharing it, and I know you had some. other
I
ones.
just wish it was on a different episode. I feel kind of bad.
No. It's great, man. I'm really glad we got to hear from you. I know you have other ones, so keep in touch, and we'll have you back so we can hear some more.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll let you know if I'm available whenever I am. I do have a lot of other stories, and they're not similar, but they're just as weird.
Yeah, well, perfect. This is the place we want to hear them. So we'll have a good night, man. We'll talk soon.
Take care.
Yeah. Take care, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Tammy, if you can hear us.
Let's find her.
Tammy, you can unmute yourself. You can rejoin us.
Okay.
All right. So thank you for that. We just heard someone tell us about a little astral projection trip and a tour through the cosmos, which is wild. But I didn't want to, we had so much more I wanted to cover with you. So let's go back. You were telling us your brother kind of talking through the murder and talking about how, she fought like Dickens. We're talking about Connie, your sister-in-law. And so he passed away in the hospital?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, the kids didn't want to go see him, and I understood that. This was especially for his daughter. This was her daddy. He was a good friend for them. He saw completely different. He was. So how you even put it together or process it, and he would ask about them every day, and so I encouraged her. I thought, his daughter and I had a long talk, and he was getting progressively worse because he wasn't on any of the FTD meds at all. So he was just, he was having catatonic phases, and then you could see the Parkinson's part starting to, he was just shaking. And what was interesting to me is when he started talking, and when the demon came out, as I've now just taken to calling it, all that would go away, and he would sort of change, and his eyes would go I got pictures of his eyes. I mean, it's fascinating stuff because his eyes were ice blue, and then And so science would say, well, because maybe he's excited and his pupils are constricting. I don't care what it was. When the man was talking about murder, his eyes were black. And when he was being like, it's like something would just come over him. And then as the days went on, he was getting progressively either catatonic or just chattering, just like these weird, like you couldn't really tell. And then he would like sort of come back in. And that for me was just the progression of the disease. That's what happens when they don't have meds. So on the day before he died, I talked with his daughter, and I told her, she asked me what I thought. And I said, I think you should go see him, even if it's just for a moment, because, it's your decision. It's up to you. But, you might, you don't know what's going to happen. And the cops just wanted to close the case. They weren't so convinced in the beginning that he was mental, because he would just up and tell them that exactly. He planned on killing us all. I mean, look at APD, do a welfare check, didn't want to, we don't want any harm coming to it. You go in, Tami. And I was over there knocking on his windows, trying to get in a window. And he hadn't cut himself. When I opened up the door, he would have he knew we were there.
Right.
He knew
he was waiting for Thanksgiving dinner. You guys were coming over.
Oh Lord.
That was the plan. And so anyway, I told her that I felt like, if it was on her heart that she might regret it, later. And I understand, like at that point, we all just wanted him put in a mental institution for the rest of his life if he recovered from his wounds. That's the quickest thing. And so interestingly enough, the very next day, the cop told me, so his daughter went to see him, spent a couple of minutes with him, and told him they loved him and that they forgave him, and it was too much for her. And so she didn't stay long and she left. And the very next morning, they were going to bring him to court and arraign him. And the cop started to walk into the room and kind of looked at him and turned around and went out and got the staff, and he had died. Wow. It's like he knew. So I don't know, sometimes they're waiting to say goodbye.
Right.
Wow. I don't know if it had to do with that or if he knew he was going to jail, but I just thought that, it was all very fascinating to me, the timing of everything. And the whole case was just like atrocious. So let me just, on a scientific note, let me just tell you what the OMI did, which is the Office of the Medical Examiner. They'd had a service for her, which was absolutely beautiful. And they didn't release her body. And so this was Thanksgiving Day. February the following year, still no body.
Wow.
And because of my ex and his connections and who we know, and again, I waited for them to tell me if they needed help. And finally I said, you need me to go? And they couldn't even cremate her and carry on. They'd already cremated him. And they still didn't have her. Come to find out, and they would deny this to the day is long, they used her as a forensic education tool because you don't see anything like that. And every forensic examiner in the state of New Mexico came to Albuquerque to do. I'm like,
that's insane.
So you just add insult to
insane.
While you're all in there looking at her like a science experiment, it was just like, you wow. Name it. It was horrible what happened to those poor kids.
That's unbelievable. What was your brother given a funeral, and did people from the cult come to the funeral?
They had a very closed one. I did not go. At that point, here's the thing, like, so when I roll in, I'm 6 feet, and everybody knows me because I stick out like a sore thumb and have my entire life. So, and I usually have just a slight bit of tood going on. And so I went to Connie's funeral, of course, and all my cousins, all the relatives, everybody's there. And it just gets overwhelming.
Yeah, sure.
They're fast us, and, they all have the buns. And it's funny, out here in the humidity in Texas, I've been like tacking my hair up in a bun, and then I get it out of the bun.
It's a muscle memory, right?
Wow. Well, she's just
like,
hot,
you know,
and then she's like, "Oh no, I can't do
I'm
this."
doing the
It's like,
bun, yeah.
hairspray. Can I have makeup, please? But yeah, so they had a very brief. I just thought it was really interesting. It was very small, and it was just family, and they had a service for him, and really they commemorated his life and didn't say much about anything else. I just found it fascinating that here it is. You know, the I don't know why they didn't go see him. I don't know why that bothers me. But not one of them went to see him. Nobody but me went to see him.
Yeah.
No preachers.
It might be because, and I don't know, but it might be because they are seeing this crime as something of the world, you know, and they're like, they have to disassociate from it to be like, that's just kind of like what I was saying in the beginning about the death. When I knew a guy in a cult that they all thought they couldn't die. They have to work loopholes through it, or just, you know, reject it outright.
Which, interestingly enough, supposedly that's what happened when John Travolta's wife died. Or was it like, you know how they have that weird thing?
Yeah.
When they were all doing their hinky dinky dinky, thinking that she would come back to life.
Right. It happens. This is what these people do, you know. I thinking about the death. Also, wasn't there a strange death from another elder in the 2x2s that kind of caused them to, I don't know, not panic maybe, but he died in a hotel or something?
Okay, so yeah, so now we'll get to that stuff. We'll get so the truth has a lot of sexual abuse, and a lot of in a lot of the cases, as it turns out, it's been preachers who are given free access to kids. Like when I was growing up, the preachers were gone. You did what they said. And if like they would come and spend a week in your house. So like in our house, we had this beautiful 4-bedroom ranch style home. And in the very one side of it, way in the back, was a guest room, which quite frankly was probably the master bedroom. But that was the preachers. And they only came like once or twice a year. And we weren't allowed, nobody was ever allowed to go in there. And I always resented it. Brother stacked up in one room, my sister and me in that room, and then mom and dad. And then here's this like pristine room with a bathroom and ensuite and the whole 9 yards. And that was the preacher's room. And you didn't go in there.
Did you call them preachers, or were these the workers or overseers?
Preachers, workers.
And you just had this pristine little throne room waiting once or twice a year for these guys.
And no one else got to be in there. No one got to stay in there. Like if we had company from out of town, like cousins came, or well, they didn't stay with us, but you know what I mean? But no, that the esteem that they hold the preachers and the workers in. And so let's say they came to our house and they were visiting around a convention time is when the preachers all come in from all over the state, and they'll have certain ones fly in from another state that maybe are going to speak at the meetings. The convention as Thursday through Sunday, and they have 3 2-hour meetings a day. And it's just gospel, and they're in big tents, like a tent revival. And, you know, so it's quiet. I mean, looking back at it as a kid, it's just, you're familiar. It's what you do. Yeah. But looking back at an operation, and you start thinking about the money that goes into operating a place of that size with 2,000 people and feeding them, and you don't pay for anything. And so that's interesting. But so let's say they come in, let's say we have, and they go 2x2. So let's say we get a pair that are coming to our house for a week. Well, mom might say, I got to run to the store. You know, I'm going to leave you with Bill, and you don't think anything of it. But like maybe something of it, you know, you dare not to. And like I have a cousin who I won't say her name, and I'll let her tell her story, but her dad was horrible. He was sexually abusing her and young men. And everybody knew, and nobody did a thing. Now, luckily for her mom, while she stayed in that marriage, her mom knew everything that was going on and felt terrible about it. Most times the moms are, what are you doing to bring this on? You know, what do you need to change in you?
Right. It goes back, that's like the loophole thing, right? When it comes to these deeply like small sects where they have all these beliefs, they got to figure out a way to make sense of it.
And then like there's a lot of alcoholism,
Mm.
and like I always thought it was interesting, I'm my father's daughter, and so I am always questioning, and it always bugged me that like in my family, my dad owned a gas station, and my brothers had to go work at the gas station every day after school. And their payment for that was that they both got 4-wheel drives. My brother had a Blazer, and my other brother had a Ford short bed. And I was very jealous because I had to stay home and do dishes.
Right.
And so quite stolen and snappy because I wanted to go work at the station. And quite frankly, I probably would have been a better employee. But just kidding. In our lives as women, that you're delegated to cleaning the house, taking care of the man, and when I look back, like a lot of the girls were being not just preachers but dads, and there was a lot of alcoholism, and like my dad and his struggle with alcohol. When I left the church, my thing was like, man, if the man wants to throw down a few drinks, let him throw down a few drinks. Like, why is it such a big deal? I felt like at the time that the reason that dad was a binge drinker. He didn't drink all the time. Mm-hmm. But when dad would drink, he went to, I didn't even know this. I had no idea. I didn't even know what alcohol smelled like until I was like 17-ish or so. Mm-hmm. And they took me in because dad was in his real estate office, holed up in there. And it was before I had left home. And that was the first time I knew. And then dad would swish Listerine all the time, like that was going to mask the smell of booze, right? And so like I didn't know. I didn't even know what booze smelled like. I just knew like you'd go into hell if you drank it. So right. That was the last thing I ever thought about my dad. Fast forward, and I'm in the field of addiction, and we detox. And one of the drugs we use, because alcohol, if you stop suddenly, can kill you.
Yeah, that's right.
I trade off that. Don't ever just stop suddenly. We would use a benzodiazepine, Librium, because it's an extended capsule and you don't really get high off it, but it keeps you status quo, and we titrate you down in a week, and then you're safe and you can go about your life. My dad always had Librium around. And I swear to God, when I opened up my treatment center and saw the medical protocols, my whole life fell into place. I was like, well, no shit.
Wow. That's wild.
Holy mollies. But like sometimes I felt like, it was the restrictiveness, I don't know if I agree that, I believe that trauma is the gateway drug. That's what I believe. And when I went to school, I knew that the shit that I had seen and the life that I had lived and the trauma that I had endured, there was a lot of other people feeling the same way. And I believe that when somebody who becomes addicted starts using for the first time, it does something different than it does to a normal person that doesn't have the trauma. There's a feeling like you just can't chase it enough because it just sort of takes it all away. Even if it's a moment in time, it takes it away. And so I feel like that. I feel like my dad knew a lot of what was going on and wasn't okay with it. And I know that his brother, who was very high up in the church, they had some sort of rift and didn't speak for a number of years. And they're just so secretive. Like we just didn't have data. The more you asked, the less they said. Like if I said to them, well, who founded us? I used to ask that all the time because I would be like, okay, I know like who founded the FLDS. Like everybody sort of has a leader,
right?
Like where come from, and they would give me some cock and bull story about like, well, a mustard seed takes 100 years, and I'm like, God, I'm not ordering a hot dog. I just want to know talking about mustard seeds. And then years later, I read this beautiful story about a mustard, how a mustard seed grows, and I was like, oh, I guess there's a little more.
He had a point, except this mustard seed became a cult. But when we're talking about it was an elder who died in a hotel, I think, and that led us to the sexual allegations.
So that dude was abusing girls,
right?
But here's the deal: So word on this street, and I am telling you, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm kind of turning into one because I'm watching like the
I'm one.
Olympics.
Yeah, that's fine. Welcome to the club.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Like, I've never been a conspiracy theorist, but you start looking at stuff and it just doesn't add up. So this guy is going to take the church down because now he's under investigation, and
Right.
they've got real hard shit on him.
Yeah.
And he just randomly dies in a hotel room alone.
Oh, you're thinking there's something way suspicious to it.
I'm just saying, I find that very odd. I don't trust him. And some of those people are really nefarious.
Well, yeah, it sounds like it. And I think from what I've read, and it's tertiary, like even him being in a hotel is weird, right? Because you're not supposed to be in a hotel.
Yes.
So do you think he was placed in the hotel?
I think somebody did something to him and either met him at the hotel or,
Wow.
and I don't have all the data on it. And I probably will because we have some connections in there with the FBI. But there's questions. Let's just say there's questions because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
So the FBI starts an investigation within the last 2 years, 1 year?
The people that I talked to, it's been about, well, by now it's probably 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
but it started with the Australian 60 Minutes.
Right.
And that's been, I don't remember what year that was in. I should probably start memorizing those facts. But I wasn't sure when I got the call, like, what are they investigating for? I didn't know because I was like, are we talking money? Because I was just starting to learn about the money. And all of a sudden I'm like, why didn't I ask these questions earlier? Like I remembered I have like, and honest to God, my mom was such a true spirit. She would have never laundered money in her life.
Right.
You couldn't get my mom to tell a lie. I mean, she was as God-like as they come, as Christian-like as they come. And I was sitting there thinking, okay, so if you have in our city, like 20 preachers and they're getting envelopes every day, well, like, where's the money going? And how do they have cars? And so those are the questions I started asking. And as I started to try to piece together, like, why was my life like this? What happened? Why don't they believe in demons? Am I crazy for saying that I saw demons? Because I've seen them repeatedly throughout my life in these situations. And then when the Carlin thing happened, it's like, okay, I can't avoid it.
Right.
I need to acknowledge what I've seen. So that started down the rabbit hole of exactly what's happening with the FBI and the cult. And the money part of it, they're being very hush-hush about, and so that I don't know. I just know that I was asked questions.
What's that phone call like? Like, is it just like, hey, this is so-and-so agent, special agent from the FBI. We're calling because of da-da-da-da. And do they just kind of let you rip or what?
I was given your number by. And so like I knew immediately because I had been in a couple of the Facebook groups and then I blocked them because they were passing data on me back to my family. Like we were in Malibu. My brother went to Malibu looking for me. And I'm like, you can pick up the phone and call me if you want to meet me. Why you got to sneak around and spy on me? So the questions so I've talked to two. And the first one was, I think my one cousin that was sexually abused, she gave them my number. Mm-hmm. And I got a call, but I spent 25 years with Paul. And so I was constantly around FBI and cops and whatever and loved them greatly. So I didn't really do much of it. I'm happy to chat but some of the questions that they were asking, I think they're going to start tracking the money and they're not coming out and saying that. But when you look at, in order to build a case for sexual abuse, you have to have cooperating witnesses. And if nobody wants to cooperate or you come back to the table later, then you're talking about, remember the FLDs when Warren Jeffs was arrested and they removed all those kids?
Yeah, vaguely.
When when you look at the people that they took from the compound,
Right.
the only life they ever knew.
Right.
And so they're not about to talk. They just want to go back to the compound and go back to life as they knew it, because they're removed and put into foster care with strange people and strange beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very much the same way is, when they have trouble finding people to talk openly, and these groups, these Facebook groups, rat people out. And the next thing you know, you might get a visit from the workers.
So they're
Now,
posing. Are they posing as former members and then kind of dragging the lake of people who've escaped and then reporting back? Dang.
So this whole network that they have, I think a lot of them are very legitimate. I mean, they're just people going, "Oh my God, I'm so screwed up,"
Right.
I mean, if you listen to their stories, they're so similar that, like, everybody just has problems. They don't know how to live. Nobody knows what to do with all this information.
You know what I noticed is looking at different videos about the 2x2s, and there's a lot on YouTube. If you go through the comments, there are so many people being like, "I was in this. I had no idea what it was." They're like, "Thank you for the video." They're feeling less alone, and there's a ton of comments. I mean, it seems like it's a smaller cult, but when you look at all these YouTube videos, there are so many.
It's huge, and I used to tell people that all the time, like, I literally could get on a plane to any country, make a phone call, and be in someone's home that night. They're everywhere.
Right, because
when
people got to remember, there's no website, and it's basically all word of mouth, but it's international. There are these conventions. People are going from house to house. It's wild. So what do you think with the money? You think it's just people getting rich?
I think that somebody somewhere is getting real rich. That's what I believe. I've watched money my whole life. My family, look what they did to me. They're so weird about money.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know what? Like my younger brother, the one that was with me, he got sober very early, but, he went through, I won't tell his story, but he's kind of hilarious. Like, he first gets sober and he's a kid, right? I mean, dude, he was like freebasing at 14.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The truth to him.
Yeah.
And I moved him out to LA to live with me because I'm like, dog, you got to quit wrecking mom and dad's cars. You can come out and live with me. Well, I didn't know I thought he was snorting cocaine. It was the 80s, right? Everybody was snorting. Right. But I didn't know he was smoking crack, they'd call it today. But like, I was so dumb. I used to sit and drink beside him while he was like, he would want me to sit beside him in the bed because he was afraid he was going to die in his sleep like Jim Morrison. And I'd be sitting there drinking. You really need to get your shit together, dude. This is like, okay.
What a scene.
I know. You just don't have an idea. You defeat the cult. And there was a TV show, if you ever have a chance to watch it, on the Amish, the Escape, but they left the Amish, and it's one of the TV shows that follows this group of
like
people that
leave. Like, are they on a Rumspringa?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think I watched them and I related to these guys so much because they go out and immediately start drinking and partying and getting in over that, and they, just life gets screwed up real quick for them because you go from, every move monitored to suddenly carte blanche. That was my brother. And so when he got sober, I think he got sober at 20 or 21. His first job was working at an offshore porn company on the internet. Right? I know. Like, that's not very spiritual, my son.
You got to write a book, Tammy. You got to write a book.
Yeah. So anyway, like for him, I don't know why I was talking about Darren in the porn, except that
drugs, people leaving.
Yeah. It's
money, someone getting rich.
Yeah, there you go. It's got to be the money getting rich thing that. Oh no, you know what I was thinking of is, so now we have cell phones. So back before cell phones, I had TVs in every room. Not that I had any scars from growing up with no TVs. As soon as I got good, a TV went in every room. I play them all day. So,
overcompensating.
No overcompensation for me. But it was like the weirdest thing because like Carlin, Connie, everybody would come to my house if there was something they wanted to see on TV.
Funny.
And I'd be like, I thought TV was against the religion, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then I hear that they have them in closets and that they pull their own, when TV. And I'm like, oh, interesting. So I guarantee you they have a website.
Oh, wow. How do you find it? Right.
Portals.
Right.
Portals. That's right. I should have.
Secret cult website out there. Someone out there is listening. We got to find this secret cult website.
I'm telling you, I guarantee you, because they're too organized.
That's what it sounds like.
I mean, even back in the day with no internet, they were organized. Like
right.
They had, they made their own hymn book, for instance.
That's right.
There's like for years, I thought those hymns were like everybody's hymns. I had no idea that they just sort of rewrote all the hymns they liked and made their own version of them.
Yep.
And print. So who's paying for that? Where's that come from? When you're in it, you don't even think of those things. No, you never question. You just soldier right through it. Unless you're me, you start thinking, and then you get told, God's going to get you.
Right. That is so wild. I think you have a book in you or something. It's so fascinating to me when it comes to like generational trauma, and it seems like you've obviously had to deal with your own. And I've been watching interviews with people they've like 5 generations deep in the 2x2s. What's your advice for trying to break the cycle of generational trauma?
Start seeing someone, talk to somebody, because I went into the world of addiction and trauma because I felt very strongly. How everybody says weed. Here, I need to plug my phone in real quick. Everybody says weed is the gateway drug. Mm-hmm. I did that after spending so much time helping people and helping families get their lives back. I saw what trauma did, and I became convinced that trauma has the same effect on the brain that drugs and alcohol do. Mm-hmm. It starts changing the way the brain works at an early age. And one of the examples I always use is like the brain's primary function is to take the irrational and make it rational. Mm-hmm. It's survival of the species. The brain is the cog. So the brain takes, if I thump my arm, the brain is the one that sends the signal. It's just this mechanism. And so as a baby, for instance, when your daughter or son starts screaming in the middle of the night, you run in, what's wrong? What's wrong? And they're like, there's a monster. And that's an irrational fear. So you, the parent, make it rational. You turn on the light, mm-hmm. you show them, there's no monsters, and you sit with them and you show the closet, and then maybe you put a nightlight in there. So that irrational thought has been made rational through the help of mom and dad, which is a normal. So the next time that fear comes, the little one will wake up and go, wait, daddy said it's okay. I got the light on. I think I'm good. Maybe a couple of more mom and dad come in, and then kids got it. Yeah. What happens in this scenario if nobody comes and the kid is screaming and nobody comes? Well, it'll get real quiet, pull the covers up and just lay there all night long, not moving a muscle.
Yeah.
And it makes it morning. So the brain will remember that and freeze it in the brain and say, at the next sign of trouble, get still, because you survived the night. And so you see those disruptions of the brain and the way we process in every member of the truth. Mm. They are so, my cousin, the one that I just love so much, she was, she got offended with me over something that I don't even to this day know what. We were in the middle of moving and being homeless, and I think they had some weather in their town, and I didn't respond quick enough, and like the projection that she took off with that information, I remember just thinking to myself, girl, you need to get some help, because they don't have any coping mechanisms. They're not taught how to cope with life, it's like God is not the answer if you're not providing the right God.
Right. They're providing man.
Yeah. I mean, everything with them. And so I can't encourage, I would be very careful with the Facebook groups because we haven't healed. So I can be all full of, I need to talk to people. I need to find my own people. but I'm still going to be responding the way I did growing up because I haven't learned new way to respond. I haven't learned how to cope. I haven't learned any of that. And I think just from my own experience, I'm probably the anomaly as far as what my life has been like in my education and where I've worked. So I have a much broader understanding of the mind and how we react. And like I was telling her, we were in Malibu one night, and it was when we were stranded. And I still wake up like every 2 or 3 hours just in a cold sweat. And my brain, speaking of irrational, my PTSD manifests like this. At night, when I go to sleep, my brain tries to put Connie back together.
Oh, wow.
And because it knows that wasn't right. And so I'll wake up like struggling because it's trying to make it full again. Yeah, I find that fascinating. So I will just sit outside and recenter and, and out there I was just put the headphones on and I was listening to music and I was sitting there, and I am not kidding you. Silent as can be. I don't know if this is a UFO. I don't know what it was, but this huge craft, silent, just went gliding right past me. And it was like, out on the ocean. And
that's crazy.
It was just, and I was going to go wake up Tate. And I was like, oh, it's already gone. He'll think I'm like just crazy. But like I was telling my cousin about that, and I could see by her reaction, Tami, don't be crazy. Like they don't know the concept of evil. I mean, they just haven't, they're still like super closed. So I know what it's like to be in that cult and not know what it's about. Mm-hmm. We'll never get an answer from any of them. They'll whitewash it. And I think, seeing a therapist, if you can, that deals with religious abuse is the best way to start your journey. And be real careful about talking to anybody, even in those groups, because there are spies. I could name 4.
Wow.
And and these groups are getting bigger and bigger. The other thing that I thought was interesting too is one of the comments that one of the girls made to me in regards to convention. So I always believed that convention was, yes, where you go to get refreshed spiritually and meet other professors, as I like to call them, truthers. But it's also where you bring people and introduce them to the truth, hoping that they'll find Christ. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of my dad's belief, was that we need to share the message and we need to bring as many people to Christ as we can. And I feel like that's gone away. Like the conventions are just for them now. So there's not a lot of outside. Yeah, it's very interesting. It's changed through the years, and maybe it's because of they all know there's an FBI investigation.
Interesting. Do you hear from them at all about what they are thinking about it? Are they trying to create a loophole in their mind for that even?
Some are trying to create a loophole. Some are actually, I would say, not threatening, as in I'm going to come and kill you or kick your ass or whatever. But they're letting it be known that you shouldn't be talking. No one should be talking. So if anybody is teetering on, they're not going to talk, and that's how they retain control. And it's such a mind war, because this whole thing, I'm going to be 63, and it took this experience and the way my family has treated me. They have like just pretty much ostracized us. Mm-hmm. And to be cut off from everyone and everything. And the only, and I asked them all for help, and that's my sin. That is my sin. Now, bear in mind, when all of this went down, everybody sent me, I probably had hundreds of text messages, messages on Messenger, Instagram, whatever, saying, if you ever need anything, we are so sorry. This is such a tragedy. Tami, if you ever need anything, please call me. So guess what? I called those people when we were stranded. And I said, you know what? I've been cut off. Things aren't going good. I need some help. I just need to have the help getting on my feet. Sometimes it would just be like we needed gas to get somewhere. I mean, it went that quick. When I was cut off financially, I had the divorce. I had a lot of stuff has gone on. And it was the idea, they would completely disagree with it. But the idea was to break me because I can be broken down. I can be brought back to Christ.
Of course. To their version of it, at least. Wow. Are there members in the 2x2s that are in places of power beyond just local government stuff, or at all in local government?
I know of. They don't infiltrate any of that. Now they hold normal jobs, and I do know that there's nurses and a few doctors, but very few. And the ones the higher your education, the less likely you are to stay in it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It goes hand in hand. The more, and that's what happened even with me early on.
You're harder to control.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they frown on the education thing. Not so much for the men. It's okay for the men to go get educated as long as it's a job. Women, they've had a hard time having any kind of women's rights.
Right.
At all. And the women propagate it the worst. I mean, if you saw the way the mothers, and that's changing, it gets diluted every year, which is why I think the church is losing members.
Right.
Because, you get to a certain place where when I was growing up, not having a TV was kind of an anomaly, but it wasn't a story. Today, not having a TV, not having a phone, not having internet access, any of that makes you a freak.
Shame.
Yeah, I don't have a TV.
Shane doesn't have a TV.
I don't own a TV. I haven't had a TV.
He's a freak.
And I am a freak. I know. So obviously these people are running some crazy operation and it's horrible, especially with the stuff that we're hearing about the children, the abuse. Is there anything though in the news that you've seen that seems false to you so far? Like any bad reporting where you're like, oh, I wish they didn't say that because that's actually not true? Or
here's what I want to say, and I believe this very, very, especially as I've been chasing my story and trying to make sense of it. And once I opened up, that's what I was going to say. Here it is. Like I am 63. My family has treated me terribly the last year and a half. The misinformation, it's like it's like opposition research in a political campaign. They can put out there and it travels, it all spreads. Right. And they like to say, we don't talk, we don't gossip. I mean, it's out like that. And it has taken me this long to call a spade a spade. That's even me, as hard brainwashed as I am and as educated and savvy and, out in the world I've been and worked with so many people and helped so many families. It still took me this last year to say I'm done. Right. I'm done. What? You guys are screwed up. It's not me, and I'm over it. I always I wouldn't speak. I wouldn't say there's problems. I wouldn't speak out against the truth. I would speak behind the scenes, and I would speak to other girls. But like my one friend, she's still there, and I love this girl. She has been as good a friend to me as I've ever had. And she had to cut me off.
Wow.
And that's
terrible. Yeah.
Why?
Well, because you are subverting their narrative, right?
Yeah.
So kind of like your brother's crime scene and all that and everything that happened, it seems like anything like that's going to make them question the world that they've built has got to be cut off.
And the other interesting thing, is because I've said this for years, like it started like when I was working in addiction. First of all, just because I'm a trauma survivor, I am constantly on alert. So I feel energy, and everybody say, oh, I'm an empath. Like everybody's an empath. I mean, come on, we get these catchphrases, but if you learn how to feel energy and feel your instincts, for us, that was a survival. Like you're not going to live or you're not going to make it through the experience if you're not keeping an eye out and watching it, especially because I left home so early. And then I had a series of like really bad things happen that like, you know, there's no way around it. It's either going to take you down or you're going to figure out how to work around it and what impact did it have on you. And I think that for most of the women, especially, like if I could say anything, I was asked one time, I go do this, I used to go do this conference every year. Like I was asked to do a TED Talk, and I was this close to doing a TED Talk when all this blew up. And I'm so grateful because now I think TED Talk is like pedophile city, but that's a conversation.
Yeah.
I learned all this stuff. See how God works in my life. What if I had become a TED Talk person and I was right in the devil's lair?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
He has me off anytime there was something that was about to go, but we were doing, I forgot what I was going to say around that, about the people of the truth. I believe fundamentally that most of them are very good, kind people.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they truly think, like my mom didn't say, you know what, let's screw up Tammy's life.
Right.
They thought they were saving my soul.
Right.
And as excited as it was, but here's where I appreciate my mom and my dad, was as the years morphed and you had things like alcoholism and like real problems that could end your life, they mellowed. They're like, we're just glad you're alive.
Right.
You know, we'll take you just as you are, and maybe someday you'll come back to the truth. And I think they ultimately gave up on that. But my dad, the night before he died, Tate was a little dude, and he died right before Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is like a torturous holiday for me these days.
Imagine.
But he didn't get to see Taylor on Halloween because he'd been in the hospital. And Taylor was Simba from Lion King. He had like a whole outfit, and he wouldn't stop wearing it. And so we, Dad, and I think it was like the 20th, right? It was the night before he died. I don't even remember what day he died on. But Tate was insistent on wearing that Simba, and my dad loved Tate. The other grandkids, when they go to the hospital and they had like tubes and shit hanging out, they were petrified. But Tate wasn't. Peapod, he'd up there and pull his oxygen out. Killed Grandpa. You know? So he always got super happy whenever Tate came. So we went to see him, and if I'd have known that was the last night I'd ever see him, I'd have spent the night with him. But he looked at me and he said, I'm so proud of you. Go and don't come back.
Wow.
And I didn't know what he meant. I was like, oh, you know, it's got to be the morphine. And then he died the next day.
Wow.
And like stuck around in my head for a really long time. Like what did he mean? You know, go and don't come back. I think my father was conflicted and wanted things to change and knew it was going to.
It's probably
and I think
so an uphill battle. If people are in that place and they see things going wrong, I mean, who knows what he probably saw? It sounds like every time I hear some person who's left, everyone's got a very similar story about encountering something extremely dark.
Yeah, there's a lot. And like I learned, I have a cousin who, I have a lot of cousins, you know, they don't do birth control. So there's a lot of us, but really we just keep popping up.
That's how they keep the membership up.
Yeah, that's serious. That's why as women, you know, we were there to procreate. And I'm like, oh, not happening. Mama wants to go to school. They're like, oh. But should I sidetrack myself? I don't know what I was going to say.
Oh, it's all good. We were talking about people. Where were we? More members, I think. I was thinking about the money and where it was going, but I forgot where you were.
I have no idea. I get like that. Well, what I do want to say, especially that I believe that there's.
You're talking about cousins. Sorry, you're talking about cousins and family.
Check this out. So this is like just all the deets that I start finding out. I'm like, really? Oh, that makes so much sense. So I had an aunt who had cancer, and this is back before the opiate crisis, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
So she got some pills, right? Unbeknownst to me, I had no idea. Now, I can tell you, I've never once seen my mother loaded. I've never seen my aunt loaded. I've never seen any of the older generation loaded.
Right.
They wouldn't be dead loaded. they were all doing pills. Do you know that my mom had opiates, benzos? I mean, they took a pill for everything. And so I was talking to my cousin, and I was like, isn't it funny how like everybody turns out everybody all this time, like I was told I was going to hell if I even stepped out of line. And it turns out everybody was like just popping pills like it was, the second coming of Christ. And he started laughing and he goes, yeah, Aunt so-and-so was the drug dealer. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
And he goes, oh, yeah, she used to get like big vats of Percocets. And
Wow.
I'm like, okay. So there's this whole thing, and that doesn't make them bad people.
Mhm.
I don't mean, I dearly loved that aunt. They and it didn't change the way I felt at all. It's just the secrecy of it all.
Right.
And the wagging of, you're going to hell, you're bad, you're this, you're that. And then
it's how they can keep control over everybody, by keeping everyone living in fear. And it seems like there's so many people who, want to publicly follow the laws of the cult, but they're obviously behind the scenes. They got a TV in the closet and a pill box beneath the bed.
Like, here's another bizarre story. My whole life is full of bizarre stories. So my dad owned he was in real estate, and this is way back in the day. He had a real estate office, and to offset his rent, he bought a big giant Kodak copier, and we made copies for 3 cents a copy. And I would go in and work for him and, make the copies and be as a receptionist, whatever. So one day this guy comes in and he wants to make a bunch of copies, but he wants to do it himself. And I said, you can't, we're not allowed. I have to run the machine. It's really expensive. And he was really insistent on it. And it was about a $300 job, which back then was a lot of money. It'd probably be $1,000 job today. And I said, listen, I'll tell you what, give me your original and I'll set the machine up and I'll have it collate it for you. And the copies will come out the side and you can do whatever you want with them and then split and you can pay me when you're done. But don't you screw with the machine. So we agreed, and I stayed out of the room, and he did, and he paid and he left. And I went in to clean the machine, and on the other side, the original had come out and stayed over there. And so I picked it up, and it was, probably about almost an inch thick, and I didn't pay much attention to it. And I went outside to see if he was still there, and he was gone, and I didn't have his info. And so I stuck it in my drawer, and I didn't really think much of it. And over the next several days, I kept seeing it, and I pulled it out, and it was all the depositions from the Santa Fe prison riot, which was one of the bloodiest riots in history of prison. I was reading it, and I was like they were impaling people with broomsticks in the anus and out the throat.
Totally insane. It was like a medieval painting.
Yeah, it was really, really bad. And there was the guy who was given his deposition had managed to lock himself in a cell, and he was talking about there were some guards and a couple of prisoners that were trying to do the right thing that were murdered terribly, terribly murdered. And they died trying to protect the staff.
Wow.
And and it was, I'm a rookie. I just stepped out of the cult, no TV, no nothing. And I was so horrified, and it was so shocking what I read. I mean, it was like reading what Carlin did, except a whole bunch of them all together.
Right.
And I remember thinking, I need to get rid of this, but I didn't want anyone else to find it. And I had like this weird connection that I know today is, for a while I just called them riders, where I would feel like something was protecting me, and like just weird things would happen, and something would shift or change, and I'd be spared from something, and I would think to myself, that's really weird, and so in this particular thing, I was like, I didn't want my parents to find it, because I knew that they would pass it around the truth, because they have a morbid curiosity with all things outside the truth. And if there's something in the news, they're all over it, and they'll talk about it and watch it and pass it around. And so I literally would take, like just a thin stack, and shred it every day and put it in different trash bins around the city. And I don't know why I did that. I can't tell you why I did that, except that I was moved to do that. I didn't. There was something about the people that died trying to do the right thing that really struck my heart, and really. And so fast forward as my life. I don't know. See, I don't even know how to say if it was a visitation or whatever. I'm just learning. I'm just looking at examples of things that have happened to me and trying to quantify them and put them in something that makes sense to me. But I would have dreams that, but like the veil was real thin. It was almost like they were there, that those people knew that I had protected them.
Mm-hmm.
And that, does that make sense?
What was the last part you said? Sorry.
It was the veil that protected them.
It was almost like they protected me.
Oh, yeah. Totally.
You know, like it was a weird thing. And to this day, I feel like I was telling you about the Taiwanese soldier that's here, that's staying here.
Yeah.
And never talk about demons to anybody, because, you know, people just think, oh, she's a crazy. So I just go about my work, my job, and polite and friendly. And like just this random, she comes up, she calls me mama, and she comes up and starts talking to me, and you know, she has that real strong accent, so she sometimes is hard to understand. But the long and short of it was, she's seen me and she knows that I have a light around me, and so she's wanted to come over and talk to me. And it's not the first time that people have said that. That's been a repeated thing, is that I have light, and I'm like, it's probably just the hair, but she just started talking to me about. Oh, I know what it was. I said that I call this God's Hotel, because we've had some really, I mean, just the people that pass through, and we're not always at the
Well,
place.
that's that real quick. That's the name of your book when you write it. Mm-hmm. That is the name of your book. Don't anyone take that. That's Tami's.
And let's write it down.
God's Hotel is the gateway drug.
Yeah, that could be the subtitle. Yeah.
It was serious, you know? A demon hunting series. But anyway, so we had a lady die in the parking lot here. Whoa. And, you know, just random. That's what I was telling you at the beginning. You might have a ghost because that guy moved her car right outside my room.
Wow.
Family.
That's crazy.
Like, dog, I don't need her car right there. You know what I'm saying? Where she's at, she might try to talk to me. You know, man, you need to get that car out of here. But I went by and I said, you're good. You're all good. You just stay right there. Don't be busy. She told me she sees demons here. She sees demons on the roof here.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'll get more about that story. But, you know, just interesting, because there's something about those of us that believe that other believers know without ever speaking a word. Mm-hmm. Because I don't walk around telling my story. You know, That's a little much for people to take, and just, you know, random people will come up and start talking to us. Another thing I wanted to tell you that was interesting with Tate, when we were living in our van, the homeless situation is really foul, you know, in LA and in Austin too. And so we are constantly having to be on guard. Like in Malibu, we had a knife pulled on us and all of our stuff stolen. And another bum tried to come after me, and Tate sort of got in between, and he like took a stick at Tate, a club. And like, these are experiences in Malibu, and like, you know, money city. And what's interesting about the Malibu people, I just sit and observe all the time. They just don't want to see. So here's this guy, the one that had the stick that he was going to take to Tate. This guy is a homeless guy that's been around for a number of years. We saw him the last time we came through Malibu, when we were actually just there vacationing, not stranded. And he's got a big old tattoo on his face. And he literally walks through Trancas, which is like a little shopping center on the north side way on the north side. Just to put it in note for you, the Kardashians, after the fires, went in and rebuilt the whole thing and really spiffed it up. And so it's kind of a hangout place. Lady Gaga goes there. You know, I used to see the crew from Breaking Bad every morning. Caitlyn Jenner used to bust my balls. And
No pun
side
intended.
note on. Listen, let me tell you something. The oddest thing, I guess I thought maybe the voice was different, you know, and when they introduced me, I was like, "You're Bruce." Like, Bruce, you're still a pompous ass.
Still Bruce.
But it was really funny. But you know, this guy would walk through that parking lot every day through the center and shoulder check people and tell them to fuck off. And sometimes with a gun, and like nobody did anything. Everybody would just put their heads down. And I'm like, you guys are paying millions of dollars, and you're gonna let this fool walk in here doing it?
So look, it's like what you're describing is just a wider societal version of a cult. You know, like we're talking about how your cult that you're from putting their heads down to ignore everything, and meanwhile, you know, look at the rest of society and how we're all brainwashed and all that stuff. But Tami, we're gonna have to leave it here for tonight. I feel like you're gonna have to come back, and we're gonna have updates.
You have so much story to tell. I was honestly thinking you were going to be more fragile and sensitive, but
Tami's a
You're
soldier.
A warrior.
Tami's a soldier. But seriously, I feel like there's people out there, not even from the 2x2s and other situations, that are probably gonna want to find you if you're even open to that. Is that a possibility? If so, how can they find you?
I told Tate, let me see. I told him to write down my let me see. We wrote it down.
It's
She started her book. Yeah.
He writes on a legal pad. You know, I love him. He's constantly writing. Let me tell you, he's okay, here we go. My Twitter account is Tami Pacheco, TamiPacheco 1961. And then my email is straightotami
at
Gmail.
Cool.
And yes, I'm very open because I think that's the direction I've been asking God for discernment and to show me where I can be of service.
Yeah.
Because like it was an addiction.
Yeah.
You know, and I just assumed that's where I would wind up, but it's turning into this whole other thing as I follow my own story and try to make sense of it.
Well,
and
I think obviously it's very inspiring stories, haunting and terrible as so much of it is, but there's a lot of people out there I'm finding that are from very similar situations, whether it's the 2x2s or, you know, there are countless cults out there and just other horrible situations. And I think you got a good way to help people navigate that. So I'm really grateful you came on, and I'm grateful that you shared your story with us. And
What am I doing here?
we'll have to keep in touch. And when there's updates, as I'm sure there will be, we'll have to have you back.
yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for
sharing your
having
story.
Yeah, thank you so much, and shout out to Tate for making this all happen.
me. What a guy.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wow.
That was a wild story.
That is wild. So
What a wild life.
holy
huh?
moly, what an episode to come back on.
There was one super chat
Oh yeah, what do we got?
from Dylan. I'm not going to say his last name, Dylan. Sorry. This is the first episode that I've caught live from the start. I watch all the clips, though. Why no super chats? Send some love, neighbors.
Yeah, what's up with that?
Yeah, what's up with that? Give us your money.
No, we appreciate that. Thank you,
like
Dylan.
a cult, like a real cult.
Thank you, Dylan. I was gonna say before we go,
Yes.
I have one odd family connection to a type of cult, and she reminded me of it while she was talking. So my grandfather, who was like my hero, right? His brother was 8 years older than him, and his brother went to World War II. He fought in the Pacific Theater. Supposedly one of the first people to see what was it, Nagasaki after the bomb dropped. If you believe in atom bombs, because we did have a conversation when you were gone about atom bombs, something bad happened out there. Whatever it was, I have photos from him when he returned of just a wasteland in Japan. Those crazy little black and white photos. Anyway, when he came back from the war, my grandfather would tell me that this guy that he looked up to, it was his hero, was just different, completely screwed up. They didn't have like words like PTSD or anything back then.
Yeah.
But obviously the war had messed him up, and he opened a like TV shop and my grandfather would kind of work for him, be an assistant in TV shop, and he would set up his older brother would set up shop in the back with a gun and just start shooting the screens to the TVs. And my grandfather was like, he's like losing it. This isn't my brother. This isn't the guy I look up to. Totally, from what I can tell, normal before he went to the war, but who knows. Anyway, he just, after all the shooting the TVs and business, he just bounced from Brooklyn, which devastated my grandfather. And no one knew where he went. No one knew. So this information is now only coming, it came way, way, way many years later through my grandfather before he passed away and through what would become his brother's children, who I know now. But anyway, when he left, what we found out was he went to LA or somewhere near LA and was basically homeless. He took his bike from Brooklyn and just went out west. He had an old Indian motorcycle. And out there, living on the streets, some guy who looked kind of wealthy said, I can help you out with your life. I'll give you my basement to live in. Just hand out these pamphlets. Have I told you this story before?
No.
I'll just hand out these pamphlets. He's like, yeah, no doubt. He didn't say no doubt. I said no doubt. He said, for sure, sir. And started handing out pamphlets on the streets of, I believe, Los Angeles. That man was L. Ron Hubbard.
What?
And the pamphlets were Scientology.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and he lived in L. Ron Hubbard's basement.
Wow.
And my grandfather's brother would meet his wife at the Scientology meetings, and now felt like connected to Scientology, and kind of became like a janitor type figure to L. Ron. And this is really weird because if anyone's seen the movie The Master, I swear to you, someone found out my family member's story, because it's almost the same exact story. Okay. World War II guy, motorcycle, goes out west, meets Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, who's basically L. Ron Hubbard.
Okay, but the movie was terrible. So anyway.
But yeah. Wait, you said the movie was terrible?
Yeah.
I love that movie.
Oh, God.
Love that movie. So yeah, L. Ron Hubbard had a house in New Jersey, and there was some kind of flood, and he sent my grandfather's brother and his wife at the time to New Jersey to go fix the house. And I guess, I don't know what happened, and I don't think anybody does. Something out there they were like, we are done with Scientology. And they were picking up all these canned goods from the flood in the basement and just took them all. And then so his son, who I'm friends with, who's, my parents' age, he was like, we were raised on L. Ron Hubbard's canned goods.
Wow.
for years, because that's all they
something.
had.
Wow.
Crazy. Then they became Quakers.
Oh.
I don't know how that happened.
One thing to the next.
It's so wild. But wow. Shout out to Tami for that.
Two more super chats, just real quick.
Let's do it.
Hisha gave us $5. Just bravo.
Thank you.
And then Dylan again. Who wants to hear my stories? I died twice. I've seen things.
Dylan.
Send Shane a few dollars and you might see me next week.
Dylan, hit me up if you haven't already. I think I've gotten through most of the emails, but I probably still need to find some. But if you haven't, Shane Cashman at scanner.com, SCNR.com. Hit me up and we'll have you on. And other than that, that was awesome. Thank you all for watching. I'm Shane Cashman. You can find me at Shane Cashman everywhere. And if you have stories, like I said, send them to ShaneCashman@scanner.com. We'll have you call in next week. What about you?
I am Alex Ayala on X. I'm not very good at that, but I will try and get better at some point.
Yeah.
And
you must tweet. This is the Twitter cult.
I don't want them coming after me, if you know what I mean. Send your stories, send your monies. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.